Good evening, everyone. Please stand for the pledge and remain standing. Thank you. Please remain standing for a moment of silence. Thank you all. Okay, roll call, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Dickey.
Here.
Vice Mayor Friedel. Present. Councilmember McMahon. Here. Councilmember Charno. Here. Councilmember Magazine. Here. Councilmember Spellich. Present. Councilmember Grzybowski.
Present. Thank you. We will start with our reports. Grady, do you have a report today?
Yes, I've got some exciting news. Kind of giving this a little bit of way, but I'll share it with the public. You probably recall at the last council meeting, we had a great presentation from our Deputy Town Manager and Community Services Director, Rachel Goodwin, about the National Gold Medal Award from her professional organization, the National Parks and Recreation Association. Well, today, the conference awarded the town of Fountain Hills Community Services Department the National Gold Medal Award. This is a huge... This is a huge honor for the town and really could not have been done without the leadership of Rachel and her team to get to where we are. This is the second year that we were nominated and made it to the finals last year. As you recall, we were one of the 3 finalists, but this year we actually won the award. And we'll actually have the award at some point, and we'll keep that in a public display area so that the whole public can see it. So really big deal. Also wanted to remind the council and the public that our annual report for fiscal year 21-22 is online now, and it's available for you to review. This covers the time period of fiscal year 21-22. Also, our most recent issue of the Fountain Hills Insider, which is our community newsletter, hit the mailboxes starting last week. It has a lot of, if you look at the back side of it, it's chock full of events pretty much between now and the end of the calendar year. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. Good evening. I have a couple of things, if you don't mind. Ballet Under the Stars was really a great turnout, and it was a wonderful event. Everybody enjoyed it. Last week, the Maricopa County Association of Governments called a special meeting for the Economic Committee to talk about the fact that Governor Ducey vetoed Prop 400, which is the half-a-cent tax that funds our infrastructure and transit systems throughout the valley. This is going to have a severe impact by the billions of dollars on the future growth of Maricopa County and other surrounding counties. And it is, we really all need to be educated about it and pay attention so that if it comes back up on the ballot, we all understand it. So I think Grady's working with MAG to have them come out and do a presentation to the council and to the citizens so we'd better understand the consequence of that veto. Also, I attended East Valley Partnership Annual Statesman's Luncheon that was discussing a little bit about the division of politics in the nation and locally, and that was interesting. I also attended Teen Court. We have a teen court here that I found really, really interesting. It's a diversion program, and when teens commit misdemeanors, they, instead of going through the full court system or to jail, they agree to go through teen court. And what teen court is, it's held in the courtroom here, and a jury of their peers, their high school students, come in, and it's just like a courtroom run. He talks about what happened to himself. He goes out, the jury of his peers deliberates, and then they come back in, and they all agree on what community service or whatever he's going to do, and he has to do it through the Maricopa County Probate Department, or his record isn't exonerated. So it was really interesting to watch these teenagers think, deliberate, and ask some pretty hefty questions of one of their fellow students. And also the Leadership Academy had an opening ceremony last week, and Class 6 is now having sessions over the next few weeks. And on Thursday, we're going to be hosting the class for Know Your Town. And that's about it.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to congratulate the town and Rachel and her department on the Gold Medal Award. It's well due. I also attended the Leadership Academy dedication, and there's a lot of really dedicated people in the town that attended that night, so congratulations to Class 6. I'm sure you'll do really well. And a little reminder that we have our homecoming game for our Fountain Hill Falcons on Friday night, so if anybody's around, they can get out to that game and support our home team. And I also attended several ribbon cuttings for the chamber during the last week and a half. Thank you.
First, I'd like to mention the gold medal that our community services folks won as well. I don't know if you guys remember, but last year when we came in as one of the 4 finalists, that's how we got hooked up with our skate park lights and the fast mini pitch. Dagnabbit. I just don't understand why it's called that, so it just doesn't stick in my head. Anyway, it's super exciting. Hopefully we'll get some fun stuff. Definitely recognition, if nothing else, out of being the winner this year. The one meeting I want to talk about is, as a guest of the Phoenix East Valley Critical Infrastructure and Transportation Committee, I attended the Chandler Chamber meeting regarding next steps after Governor Ducey vetoed an approved ballot measure that would have allowed Maricopa voters to extend a sales tax to fund transportation projects. This dedicated half-cent sales tax was developed by the Maricopa mayors in the 80s because the state wasn't able to get a plan together for highway spending. In 2004, the mayors realized that it was still needed, so they worked together again to make it happen. Both times, wow, I'm so excited, I turned the lights off. Both times this was approved by the Maricopa voters. That half-cent sales tax represents over 50% of the county's overall portfolio. Without this continued investment, much of our growth is at risk. Roadways are one of our biggest attractions to new businesses. We'll also see our assets decay without this funding. The representative from Maricopa Association of Governments says that the devastation from losing this dedicated half-cent sales tax cannot be understated. The group is working on an impact study to make sure that the governor, state legislators, and candidates for those positions understand how important this is for Maricopa roadways, which also impacts the traffic through our state. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So I'm glad that you both were able to hear that firsthand, the kind of stuff that Grady and I, and probably Mike too, with RPTA, have heard so much over the last several months. And also congratulations to Rachel, and because what is reflected in that is that she's serving, and we are serving our community with wonderful parks and with activities, and we look forward to more, including Oktoberfest, which is also on Friday and Saturday. I met with a potential connection for a program that will be about schools for our possible spring Fountain Hills Cares event, but right now, the one that's coming up on October 20th will be for veterans, so we look forward to that. I think we put some information out about that today. I attended our East Valley Mayor's meeting, quarterly meeting. The Greater Phoenix Economic Council had our mayor supervisors meeting. It's the 29th session for the legislative director for GPEC, whose name is Rob Gallagher, but I knew him as the chief of staff at the Senate when I worked there in 1998. So he's been at this for a long time and really doing his best for economic development in the state of Arizona. At that time, we had a 15-15 split in the Senate, so it was a unique time of bipartisanship, and things worked out really well. At GPEC, we've been having similar conversations about Prop 400, of course, but as we are with MAG and the League about cities and towns having local decision-making sort of being eroded year after year, including our zoning, which we really are keeping an eye on this year. GPEC has been very successful at attracting businesses and activity in the valley, but And we expect water to be an issue, and we'll hear more about that today, but also the power grid has now started to become an issue, so he finds himself discussing that, trying to remain competitive here in Arizona, which so far we have been. We had a sister city planning meeting for possible international visitors here, or hopefully more to come on that. And speaking of that, we had Community Relations Director Bo Larson, our Economic Development Director Amanda Jacobs, and I met with the delegation from Israel, which was coordinated by the Global Ties Arizona, which is the implementing organization for the State Department. They have an international visitor leadership program. They had lunch here in town. They met with Sister Cities reps, and they were some policy advisors for Knesset very high up. They were informative and lively and left me wanting to look more up about their country. We met with our branding team, which we're in the process of that right now with Councilman Magazine and Director Goodwin and Town Manager and Bo, and there's more to come on that too. Leadership Academy, that was awesome. And that's it for activities. I forgot to mention that item 7D on the consent agenda will be the first item on the regular agenda. We had a request to do that. So that takes care of that. Our next good part of the meeting is our stellar students. So the way we do this with the students, I read your name and what your friends and teachers said about you. And then Angela gives you the certificate, and then we'll take a picture with the paper when we're done. And while I'm down there, though, I will be calling on the Four Peaks chapter of the DAR to come up, and we'll do a proclamation for Constitution Week. So we'll get started with the kids first. Well, McDowell Mountain, we begin with the elementary school. Emmeline Anaya, she here? Emmeline? No? Well, we'll read all the good stuff about her. So her teachers and her principals. Emmeline has demonstrated all four of the Falcon pillars: respectful, responsible, safe, and kind. She always has a smile on her face and is willing to help whenever she can. So we'll make sure Emmeline gets their certificate. Next from McDowell, we have Pablo Michelle. Is Pablo here? Yay. Come on up to see Angela. Pablo, he also has demonstrated all four of the Falcon pillars: being respectful, responsible, safe, and kind. He helps others all the times, and he gives maximum effort. That's Pablo. Next, we go to the middle school, and we have Natalie Jarrett. Is Natalie here? All right. Hope I said that right. So Natalie's a force of nature. She's confident, creative, very bright, and a well-spoken young lady with a streak of blue hair. She's quick, and where'd you get that from? She's quick with her smile, always willing to answer questions. We see how she helps her classmates and her teachers frequently without even being asked. She's very kind to others, honest and direct. That's Natalie. Also from the middle school is Jacob Lagner. Is Jacob here? Ah. Jacob gets out of his car every day with a smile. He's a joy to have in classes. He participates in discussions, asks questions, and he always does his best work. Jacob is very kind, friendly, thoughtful, and works well with anyone he's sitting with. You guys are with him right now. Thank you, Jacob. Now we go to the high school. I know that Kittrick isn't here, but Kittrick Garman from the high school is a joy to have in class. He's a very bright student with a bright future. He has A+ in honors English class, and is a varsity athlete as a sophomore. So let's give it for Kittrick. And the last but not least from the high school is Matthew Deanna. Is Matthew here? Hey. Matthew, he's very polite and respectful, has his A in English 10. Matthew is a very bright student with a very bright future. Thank you, Matthew. Okay, now we're going to do a proclamation for Constitution Week. Thank you, welcome. We're so happy to have you. Four Peaks chapter of the DAR. So I'll give you this to hold, and then I'll read it to you on a paper that I can actually see. Come on up, that's great. Constitution Week. Whereas the Constitution of the United States of America, the guardian of our liberties, embodies the principles of limited government in a republic dedicated to rule by law, and whereas September 17th, 2022 marks the 235th anniversary of the framing of the Constitution of the United States of America by the Constitutional Convention, and whereas it is fitting and proper to accord official recognition to this magnificent document and its memorable anniversary and to the patriotic celebrations which will commemorate it. And whereas Public Law 915 guarantees the issuing of a proclamation each year by the President of the United States of America, designating September 17th through the 23rd as Constitution Week. So therefore, I, Jenny Dickey, by virtue of the authority vested in me, Mayor of Town of Fountain Hills, do hereby proclaim the week of September 17th through the 23rd as Constitution Week, and ask our citizens to reaffirm the ideals of the framers of the Constitution that they had in 1787 by vigilantly protecting the freedoms guaranteed to us through this guardian of our liberties. Thank you so much for bringing this to us, and if you'd like to say a few words, we'd love to hear from you.
I would just like to thank you, Mayor Dickey, very much for helping us to commemorate Constitution Week and this most important document.
Thank you. Thanks so much for coming. Our next item is a presentation regarding water issues, which has been a lot of interest recently. Grady?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and Council. As a number of you have been hearing from your constituents, there's been a lot of concern in the news media lately about the water reservoirs, Lake Mead and some of the other major water reservoirs are way down from where they've been historically and the drought that we're in. We're delighted to have tonight Doug Dunham, who is the manager of water resources for EPCOR. He's got a really great reputation. Previously had a long career over at Arizona Department of Water Resources. We have, along with him, we also have the great team of EPCOR that has been very helpful to us in troubleshooting a lot of our customer issues relating to water. We have Frank Metzler, the Director of Operations, if you could just raise your hand, and Chad Guzman, who's up here. He's about to introduce Mr. Dunham. He's our Government Relations Manager, and he's been very helpful, and when we've had matters or issues that need to get resolved, he's always right there. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Guzman before we kick off the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor Dickey, council members. For the record, my name is Chad Guzman. I'm our Director of Government Relations for EPCOR Water. First of all, just thank you so much for time on your busy agenda to come and talk about a very important topic, as Mr. Miller just outlined. Mayor Dickey and everyone, thank you so much for your continued leadership on these important issues. Thank you so much to Bo Larson, who is instrumental in helping us coordinate this presentation. It's been fantastic to work with. And special thanks to Town Manager Miller, who does a great job of keeping us informed about what's happening in the town and vice versa. Really appreciate the spirit of collaboration that we enjoy with the town of Fountain Hills. So tonight we are here to address water supply, water planning that EPCOR has engaged in for decades to prepare for this moment in a time of drought, where we all read the headlines every day, and with a new shortage declaration on the Colorado River by the federal government, we want to come here and instill confidence in you that EPCOR has been very well prepared for this moment in the decades of planning that have gone into it. So tonight, I'm honored to introduce two of the senior managers on our leadership team at EPCOR. First, our Director of Operations, Frank Metzler, who oversees this system, water system for the town of Fountain Hills. There is nobody that knows the nuts and bolts of this water system better than Frank. Is going to give a kind of a system-specific overview of what we have here infrastructure-wise for the town. And second, Doug Dunham, our manager of water resources, has decades of experience before coming to EPCOR at the Department of Water Resources, really one of the foremost experts in the field to talk from a more statewide, higher level perspective on water resource management for the state of Arizona. So with that, happy to introduce Frank Metzler. Thank you.
Good evening. Let's see here. Hey, I did it right. So as Chad said, my name is Frank Metzler. I'm the Director of Operations for the Eastern Division of EPCOR Water Arizona. And I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you about the work that we do to take care of the customers here in Fountain Hills and make sure that everybody has water. In these times when there are a lot of concerns about the drought and a lot of discussions in the media, it's important for everybody to know that there are a lot of people working hard to make sure that there's water for everyone and that we're doing everything in our power to make sure that we're prepared for the future. So the good news is that I just have one slide, and I'll talk very briefly about what we're doing from an operations perspective to be prepared for any type of cutback on the Central Arizona project. And then with that, I'll hand it to Doug, and Doug can get into much more detail about where we are with the Colorado River and the reservoirs and the Central Arizona project. So last year, right about this time, we came and gave a presentation, and I looked back at my slides the other day, and I realized that I threw a whole bunch of numbers on the screen, and I talked about a whole bunch of math, and I realized that I think the message got lost in the math. So this time I'm going to try to keep it a little simpler, and then I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have if you want additional information. So, in a nutshell, if you live in the town of Fountain Hills, your potable water, when you turn on the tap, comes from one of two sources. It either comes from one of two groundwater wells that we have right here in town, or it comes from the Central Arizona project. The water from the Central Arizona project is surface water. It comes up Shea Boulevard to our Shea surface water treatment plant, where we clean it, remove turbidity and chlorinate it, and then push it out into the system. Now, when we talk about the drought, I receive a lot of phone calls and people ask me, well, what if there's no water in the Central Arizona project, and where would the water come from, and all that sort of thing. The first thing I want you to understand is the two wells that we currently have in production here in Fountain Hills are very good wells. And for about 4 months out of the year, roughly from December through March, those two wells alone could meet all of the water demand in Fountain Hills if required. We'd have to make some adjustments to one of the wells to treat for arsenic, but that's a very straightforward process. We've done that at many other wells. We know how to do it, and we can do that if we need to. In the months of April through November, there are typically periods where the demand in the system from our customers exceeds the ability of those two wells to produce enough water to take care of all of our customers. And if you add up all of that demand between April and November, that volume of water represents about 167 million gallons of Central Arizona project water. If you convert that into acre feet, that's 512 acre feet. Now, to put that in perspective, 512 acre feet, that might sound like a lot of water. The town of Fountain Hills Central Arizona project annual entitlement, the volume of water that you're entitled to from the Central Arizona project, is 8,909 acre feet. So in other words, the volume of water that exceeds the ability of our current two wells to take care of customers represents about 6% of of Fountain Hills' total CAP entitlement. If you flip that around on its head, what that means is, unless there's a cutback on the Central Arizona project of roughly 90% of the total volume, everything's all right. okay? The bottom line here is that Fountain Hills can sustain a significant CAP reduction, and we will still be able to meet system demand for all of our customers without requiring any type of mandatory cutbacks or reductions. So hopefully that's a little more clear than I was last year. I'm happy to answer any questions, or more than happy to hand it over to Doug.
I think last time you were out, you mentioned that we did have a third well. If we needed to use that, we always had that as a backup as well, right?
So there are 2 other wells, and after my presentation last week, I had a chat with the Fountain Hills Sanitary District. And what I learned is that in the years before me, which goes back a long time, those 2 wells were essentially taken offline because of the recharge of reclaimed water that occurs at the lake there where the fountain is. So those 2 wells, we can't really use those wells in the future unless we came to some sort of agreement with the Fountain Hills Sanitary District. And I'm fairly certain that those 2 wells would have to be treated for nitrates and arsenic. So if we get into a situation where we need additional wells, we'll certainly take a look at those and have a discussion with the Sanitary District. But it's really up to them whether or not that would be an opportunity for us.
I have a question. The numbers look great here. However, I'd like to know for what length of time do those figures apply to? 100 years, 50 years? I mean, it sounds really good, but what length of time are we able to provide for ourselves in Fountain Hills without having to go elsewhere?
No, that's a fantastic question. And the reality is when you have wells, every well's different. But when you pump wells for an extended period of time, they experience what's called a cone of depression. And so you gradually draw the water down around the well. You essentially lower the water table. So we've never run those wells for an extended period of time over years at full volume. I wish I could answer your question directly with how much pumping they could sustain. The reality is, and Doug will talk much more about this, if we were ever to get into a situation where the Central Arizona project experienced an extended cutback of a very high volume, we would drill additional wells. There's enough groundwater out there to sustain the demands of Fountain Hills, but we would have to drill additional wells. And you'd want them not immediately adjacent to one another so that they don't draw from the aquifer right next to each other, if that makes sense.
Yes, Councilman?
Are we finished? I'm sorry. I'm a little puzzled. Do you know why there'd be any question as to whether or not the sanitary district would allow use of wells 3 and 4? And you said something about drilling more wells if necessary. How do those 2 relate?
So my understanding from my time at the Department of Water Resources in Arizona DEQ is that when you have a facility that recharges reclaimed water back into the water table, it's important to not try to draw potable water from immediately adjacent to those types of facilities, because there are nitrates, there are nutrients in there, and there are other constituents of concern. You prefer to take your water from the aquifer farther away from where reclaimed water is being recharged. And I'm not sure I understood your second question, sir.
Well, I was just comparing the 2. You said if we had to drill 2 more wells, and I'm saying there are 2 more wells. Why, you just answered the question.
Okay.
I think we have larger picture, probably questions that'll be answered on the next segment, because I think we all have the knowledge that Fountain Hills itself is doing good, but we also see everything that's happening around us. So there's messages from all over the place about, how low the water is in the lakes and Lake Mead and all this. So I think there's a desire out there to help in any way, in a more broad way. And so I think we'll talk later after you're all through with Grady about some of the things that maybe we could do. So, yes, sir.
A quick question. On the annual cap entitlement, the 8909 acre feet, how much of that are you using now in terms of the mix of wells and cap water?
So that was on the slide last year. We typically through the year right now are running a blend of about 60% CAP water and 40% groundwater, and there are various reasons for that. The water that we don't take directly and put into the system, we don't lose that water. We recharge that water in other parts of the valley. So the city's not losing credit for the water that it's entitled to. The town, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. My name is Doug Dunham. I'm the Water Resources Manager for EPCOR. I'm a Phoenix native, but more importantly, I'm a 27-year veteran resident of the town of Fountain Hills. So I put my stakes down here a long time ago on raising kids, and here I am. So happy to be with you. I have a history of every time I go out and give a water resources drought speech that it rains, and true to form, it rained at my house this morning. So I just need to do these every day and we'll be fine, right? So just real quick, EPCOR, who we are. We have water systems across Arizona and New Mexico and Texas, as you can see up and down the river in Mojave County, as well as the West Valley and down in the Southeast Valley in Santan, along with our Rio Verde and Chaparral systems right here. So one of the things I'd like to point out every opportunity I can is that Arizona's done a really good job at managing our long-term water supplies. It doesn't really always get out in the press. All the detailed work that has gone into making sure that the state is well positioned with water supplies. So one of the things that I'd like to point out is that in 1980, the Groundwater Management Act was passed that created the Arizona Department of Water Resources and put in the framework, the legal framework we have to manage Arizona's water supply under these really strict state laws. One of the key components to that is that the code requires us to have mandatory conservation requirements for every single water use sector. So whether you're a municipal provider like EPCOR, or you're a farmer, or you're an industrial user, you all have conservation requirements you have to meet. And so when I get asked, how much water do we have and how many people can we support here, I always say, I don't know. Because we have done such a good job of putting in place conservation programs. We use much less water today than we used to. And in fact, our peak water use was in 1980, and our current water use today is actually less than what we used in 1957. And that accounts for increased population as well as our increased economic output. So on the graph we have here, the blue water drops is our demand across statewide. The orange people graph there line is the population increase, and then you can see our economic output and how much that we have grown. So you can do good water management, increase conservation, and still support people and a strong economy. Whoop. Did it now. All right, I need all the help I can get.
Talk amongst yourselves. That's good.
Okay. All right. So one of the programs, I think Frank alluded to it too, that happens on a statewide basis, and EPCOR participates in that, is the underground storage and recovery program. So what we do is we store renewable water supplies underground, and then that water is available, it's tracked, it's protected, and then it's available to recover later when you need it. To date, we have stored across the state over 3 trillion gallons of water. That equates to the annual demand for the city of Phoenix for 30 years. What we store is a combination of CAP water, reclaimed water, and then on an annual basis, we restore and recover various surface water. There is a state agency out there that is housed with the Arizona Department of Water Resources called the Arizona Water Banking Authority. They were established in 1996, and their entire mission is to obtain renewable water supplies, store those underground as a backup supply for municipal and industrial users like EPCOR for firming, and they also provide some of the backup supplies for some of the tribal settlements. To date, they have stored over 3.76 million acre feet of water underground, and that water is going to be available if there are deep cuts on the Central Arizona Project system. That water is available to the M&I contractors as a backup to keep them whole. Part of the effort that goes into this is not just putting it in the ground, but how are you going to get it back out? So for the past 5 years, EPCOR has been a key participant in the RPAG group, and that's all the water providers in the valley, along with the Central Arizona Project, Department of Water Resources, and the Water Bank to lay out exactly how much water each water provider is going to get, how much do they need, how do they cover that, and where is that recovery going to happen. And that gets down to system-specific requirements. So for a water system that is based primarily on groundwater, but that uses the credits indirectly, like some of our West Valley systems, the water bank simply will provide us underground storage credits to keep the accounting square for those systems. But systems like here in Fountain Hills, where we actually rely on wet water deliveries to our surface water treatment plant, we will be getting wet water deliveries that will be recovered, or we may exchange recovered credits for wet deliveries from some other water provider, say for the city of Phoenix, for example. So we'll make sure that moving forward, if there are deep cuts on the CAP system, not only will we get credits, but we'll be able to have wet water deliveries to our water treatment plant to keep that functioning. So in addition, the Department of Water Resources also has several requirements in place under state law to mandate that water providers like EPCOR do have a drought plan and are able to respond to these types of conditions as they arise. So we have a water system plans that we have to update every 5 years. Those specifically include analyses on our water supply, our drought preparedness, and then what our water conservation programs are and how successful we are at meeting those. On an annual basis, we have reports that we have to file with the department as well, and the designations of assured water supply providers out there, like our system here in Fountain Hills, we also have to project out in a 5 to 10 year increments on our ability to support additional growth versus our supply. And then we also have an annual conservation report that we submit to DWR in addition to the Arizona Corporation Commission. So overall, our water portfolio for EPCOR here in the state is really robust. It's very varied with multiple sources of water. So as you can see, the majority of our water supply is groundwater, but we do have CAP water, which makes up about 13%. We have stored water, so that's those other renewable supplies that we've stored for future use. We have other surface water allocations within the state, and then we reclaim, recycle all of the wastewater in our wastewater systems, and we store and recover that as well for future use. So within EPCOR, we have a constant internal review process that we go through. We are constantly looking at our growth versus demand versus supply portfolio. And then this gets down to also the detailed engineering work that Frank and some of his group does as well to make sure that we have the appropriate pumps, the right pipe size, those kinds of things in place to support any new growth and the maintenance that goes along with that. We are constantly exploring new water resources and forming regional partnerships. And then our conservation programs in interior, within our system, make sure that the systems themselves are as efficient as possible. Examples of that are like our valve exercise programs, metering upgrades to make sure that we're controlling and making sure we're not losing water and it's as efficient as possible. Also, we have what we call our consumer-facing conservation program. So we're really starting to ramp this up because of the renewed concern of the conditions on the river. We're getting a lot more interest on customers wanting to know how they themselves can save water. So we're really pushing out a lot of new information through on our monthly bills. For those of you who signed up for our text messaging program, we send that out through the text as well. And we're pushing out a lot of new information on our website. So available for free of charge from us are self-audit kits, so it helps you determine if you've got leaks within your house. We have interior low-flow retrofit kits, so that's new modern shower heads, those kinds of things that can reduce your water use. Guides on landscape watering, guides on desert landscaping and how to plant, and we provide leak detection assistance. We have an entire customer service switchboard that is set up. One of their main jobs is to walk through with customers to help determine if they have a leak, where they are, and how to try to address those. I've seen those customer service representatives spend 45 minutes to an hour on the phone with a customer and trying to help people out. We're rolling out a new enhanced billing system where you can sign up, and if there's a big spike in your water use, or on a daily or a weekly basis, you'll get a notification that there's something going on. So if you do have a leak that you don't see, you don't have to wait a month to find out that you've got this increase in your bill. It'll alert you right away. And then lastly, we're producing a series of really good detailed online tutorials that show customers how they can do some of these maintenance issues on their own. Instructions on how to replace a toilet valve, flapper, how to look for other leaks around the house, those kinds of things. And so they're really good how-to videos right there online. So Frank kind of gave you the daily or annual use numbers. I'm going to give you the long-term use numbers that's available to Chaparral City. So as Frank mentioned, our CAP allocation is 8,909 acre-feet a year. We have demonstrated to the Arizona Department of Water Resources through the Assured Water Supply Program, based on our 100-year Assured Water Supply designation, that there is over 8,695 acre-feet of groundwater available to us for a 100-year period in this subbasin. Our total designation right now is 9,317 acre-feet a year for 100 years. We have currently a little over almost 4,000 acre-feet of long-term storage credits that we have stored underground that will be available for us for later recovery. And so our total supplies given together in any 1 year is over 21,000 acre-feet over that 100-year period. In 2020, our total demand was a little over 6,000 acre-feet per year for the entire year. That represents about 28% of the total supplies that would be available to us. In 2034 is when our designation expires. That's when we'll have to go back to the Department of Water Resources and get it renewed. And the demand that we projected based on growth projections for that year was a little over 9,000 acre-feet. So altogether, whether you're looking at it in a short-term or long-term 100-year plus timeframes, we've got a robust, redundant water supply here in Fountain Hills. And with that, I'll take any questions you may have.
I'm guessing we have some. Mike?
Yeah, real quick. Good to see you again, Doug.
Nice to see you.
And that supply you just rattled off, that includes the state trust land that we annexed a while back, doesn't it, in terms of?
Yes, so the state trust land doesn't actually have an allocation in and of itself. The state land department has a CAP allocation, but they've never coughed it up with any land. So this is strictly within our allocation that we have right now.
Thank you. Did I hear correctly that we're using about the same amount of water as in 1957?
We're actually using less water than we
Less.
were in 1957.
And
yes.
there's enough water for Phoenix for 30 years?
Yes, so the total supplies that had been stored underground under the underground storage and recovery program would equal the annual demands for the city of Phoenix for 30 years.
I must be missing something because I'm pretty puzzled. Every week, just about every week in the Republic, I read a story about a potential water shortage crisis. What am I missing?
Well, headline writers like to get your attention, so you read the article. So that's part of it. The other thing is depending on your community, you're going to be in different situation. Some communities have multiple sources that they're going to be able to switch to if there is a severe cutback in the CAP. Other communities are really very dependent on the CAP, and they don't have that flexibility. The cutbacks that we've seen already have severely impacted a lot of the agricultural community. So the farmers in Pinal have already lost all their CAP allocations. So they're scrambling to try to go back to groundwater to use that. So it's going to be a balance of who has what in their portfolio, and how do we deal with that. So it is very concerning, the conditions on the river. It is not something that is just going to go away on its own. It's going to take a lot of work from a lot of corners of the water management world, between the 7 basin states and Mexico and the Bureau of Reclamation to try to solve this. There are also going to be some trickle-down impacts. So even though we may not be directly impacted on our ability to serve CAP here, with the amount of cutbacks that are happening, we're going to see our costs increase. The cost to maintain the canal, maintain all those pumps, remain the same, but there's less units of water, less participants in that to share those costs to maintain that canal. So our direct costs are going to go up because of that. We're going to see potential impacts if the lake levels continue to drop. That's going to impact their ability to generate electricity. That's going to have impact on power markets across the West. So while the doom and gloom, we're going to dry up and blow away, I do not believe that that is going to happen in the immediate future or in the near future. But there's going to be other impacts that we're going to see.
I think I may have asked this question the last time you were here. Do you have a public affairs department?
We do.
Is there any way to get the truth out there, to get the facts out there? We got one reporter in particular who has steeped herself in the Republic on this issue, and I have a feeling that based upon what I read, they don't know all the facts, and they're not reporting the facts. And I understand that press sometimes wants to report doom and gloom, but they should have the ability to balance it with the facts and let people know where we stand. I don't know if your public affairs department has considered doing something like that, but I think it's really necessary.
Well, we're trying to balance our messaging. One, let's not panic. We're not, the sky is not falling. We're not all gonna have to pack up the U-Hauls and move back east of the Mississippi. But at the same time, it is an issue. It is a growing issue. And we need to do all we can as individuals and as a community to enhance conservation as much as possible. So it's a fine line that we're trying to walk between don't worry about it and oh my God, there is a balance in there.
I don't want to sound at all critical, but to me it sounds like on the one hand, but on the other hand. That's what Harry Truman said about economists. It's hard for me to digest what you're saying and figure out how to convey to the public what really is going on. We got plenty of water. You said that. 30 years just for Phoenix. There's plenty of water. And so I understand there are other tertiary issues And it seems to me they could be explained, but the amount of water that we have and have available to us, I really think should be explained to the public.
What you had, I think, a couple of slides ago would address what I think Councilman was talking about as far as you having a public affairs office, because you said that you have all that information available. The idea of the state versus where we get our water from is, I don't think there's any untruths to it. It's just, it's a different story. You're in Fountain Hills, we have wells, we have, a certain population. These numbers, just for us in our little enclave, are great, right? But what couldn't we do, especially since hardly any of our money, of our water is coming from CAP, but can we help with some of the things that you said you have listed, and maybe some of the things that are a little bit more personalized to us? Like, I know a lady had written me, and I think she had a comment for today, like some of our monuments or monument signs that have grass in front of them. I mean, is it a drop in the bucket? Is it worth it? Is it a good, I think it's a good thing to do, to show as an example. If you know it's going to rain, don't water at your house. And Grady and I spoke earlier about putting something together to not only show some of the things we can do, but to also demonstrate some of the things we have done, which, we have low water landscape in place. We use a lot of recycled water thanks to the sanitary district, our golf courses and the parks, and all kinds of our watering is done that way. I think, Grady, maybe you can explain a little bit about how little we actually use potable water for irrigation, but we would like to get together some kind of information that shows not only what's really happening, like you're saying, what steps we could take, what steps we already have taken. But granted, there is a lot of water, like you just said, but it's like having a lot in your savings account, but no salary. We have a lot, but we have to address the fact that it's not getting replenished the way it was, and that's the lakes, and that's the stories that we're hearing. So it is a little bit of both. Grady?
Yeah, in fact, we don't really irrigate our grass in our parks, with the exception of Fountain Park and the Linear Park here in the wintertime. In winter use of water, that's a peak time. You don't want to really do that if you can avoid it. And we're so fortunate that the sanitary district here also has these wells that they have, so that during off times they can basically, they use the storage, and then when there's peak times, then they draw down that water for the golf courses and the parks and things like that. So, I think we're very fortunate because we do get credit for the sanitary district with what they do, because under the Groundwater Replenishment Act, when you do pull water out of the aquifer, you're supposed to put water back in, or you pay money, like almost like a fee to the state. So we're even though we have two separate entities, they are kind of working in harmony with each other, and we're benefiting as a community as a whole. I thought your presentation was really right on. This is the third one I've been to. CAP was doom and gloom, because all their water supply is just coming from the Colorado River, the upper and the lower basin. So that was a totally different type of presentation. Another one I had was from the Department of Water Resources, which looks at the entire water portfolio of the state, and it was much more balanced, just like yours was here today as well. So it's very good that you're doing this, because I know our residents have been very concerned about this, and I do think we may want to work with you and your company to maybe do some messaging for our residents, even in our own publications, on maybe conservation methods and all that. Again, we're very fortunate because we don't have residents that have a lot of grass in their yards. We're probably one of the few that I can think of. It's mostly all desert landscaping, you see. But thank you. You really hit home some really important really good points. I did have a question, though. Two things that you have on your slide right before us. You're talking about the 100-year designation. So my understanding is when you have any kind of development, like let's say you have a large master plan development, like a large-scale subdivision that's going to come in, I understand they are required to bring in a 100-year water supply, correct?
Yeah, that is correct. The Assured Water Supply Program is applicable within all of 5 of the state's active management areas. So we are in the Phoenix AMA here. And so it's based on the definition of subdivision from the Department of Real Estate, which is 6 or more lots. You have to show that there's a 100-year water supply, renewable water supply, for that subdivision before the plat can be approved and recorded or any building or any lot sales happen. To meet that requirement, EPCOR has obtained a designation for our entire system. And so we account for, under that designation, every bit of demand that we have within our system here. So whether it's not just the houses, it is the schools, the businesses, the grocery stores, the gas station, and all of the houses. And so yes, we demonstrate that 100-year renewable supply is in place. And one of the things we do under that requirement is, as Frank mentioned, we do use some groundwater, but we have to replenish that under the state requirements. So a portion of that CEP allocation that we don't directly deliver to customers, that goes to, as a payback to the aquifer, to recharge, to account for the groundwater demand, to try to maintain the balance in the aquifer that we have here.
One last question. On your slide, you're talking about the 2034 year designation expires. So what is involved in getting that renewed, or what does that really mean?
So what we'll do is we'll take a look at exactly what our demands are at that point in time, and then we'll take a look at what growth potential that we still have within the system, within our CCNN. And then we project that out over a 100-year period. How many more customers are we going to add? How much more demand are we going to grow? And then we have to go to the Department of Water Resources and say, this is our portfolio, and these are our projected demands. And right now, we have the combination of the 2 main sources, which would be the CAP allocation as well as the groundwater. And believe it or not, the Fountain Hill subbasin here on this side of the McDowells, it's actually a really deep, fat, well-producing aquifer. So we're doubly blessed with not only the CAP allocation, but we're sitting on a really nice aquifer that will be able to supply a robust water source for many, many years.
Is EPCOR looking to make any significant investment in desalination or any of your other partners?
Yes, we are. One of the bills that was passed this last legislative session is kind of a renewed, enhanced WIFA, so it's the Water Infrastructure Finance Authority. And that had over $1 billion set aside for projects within the state of Arizona, particularly targeted at infrastructure and new water supply enhancement. So we have been talking with several entities, and including making sure that the governor's office and our legislative leaders know that we're here to help. And we have some expertise in this. We have very large pipelines that we currently run in the state of Texas. And one of those pipelines is actually a longer distance than it would take to pipe desalinated water up from the Sea of Cortez into the Phoenix metro area. So the technology is there, the expertise is there, and we're going to need to import water into the state. So that's definitely one of the items on the menu that we're going to be pursuing.
Thank you. Supervisor Galvin had put out a message. I think they voted down a DWID for the Rio Verde. And in that newsletter, it said that EPCOR would likely be, or already did, maybe have a proposal to help those folks out. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Certainly. So the Arizona Corporation Commission, which regulates us as a private utility, has opened a docket to explore the possibility of having a private utility provide the standpipe service that City of Scottsdale has said that they're going to withdraw. We submitted a letter at the request of the commission to express whether we would be interested in that or not. We are interested. We did point out a couple of questions that we would have for the commission to consider. The commission is going to be, has asked for public comment, public input on that, and they've been receiving comments both from written comments, and then they're going to schedule an open hearing to discuss that. We would be looking for additional water supplies to help support that effort, but we are interested, and that decision whether or not to move forward is really going to be up to the Corporation Commission.
Thank you. And it sounds like it would, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. Sorry, Sharon.
Well, Mayor, you took my question, but I do want to make a comment that I was playing on our website. I was totally listening to you, I swear. But I was playing on the town website just to see how we are informing our people. To Councilman Magazine's point, it is an important message to make sure we get out. And I do see we've got, under the Public Works section, Bo's been working really hard to try to help people get as informed as possible. We do have a water conservation and an EPCOR water management tab, but you have to know it's under the Public Works. One, you can update the slide presentation with this one because this was way more user-friendly and intuitive than the other one from last year. Two, I would love to see a link from the main page, the residents page. I think that would be great, a water conservation or, actual facts about your water kind of thing. And totally not a question for you, I just needed to tell Bo before I forgot. Thank you.
And if I may follow up with that, the leadership program that you guys just launched, one of my partners at EPCOR is going to be teaching a class on specifically centering on water conservation at the home and how we can enhance that. So that'll be part of that program. And then we also do constant outreach here in town. And we've, this last year, we've had a couple sessions with the community garden to help teach about managing your water use, your plantings, and et cetera. And fun fact, about industry standard is 60 to 70% of household water use is actually outdoor landscape watering. So that's really a place we can concentrate on reducing water demand.
That's huge. The leadership also, they go to the sanitary district and learn a lot about their operations. And also the sanitary district has a subcommittee with the town working on sodium in the water. So we're all kind of going in the same direction here. Any other questions? Any other questions or comments? And again, we did have people from the community ask questions about whether we can look at some of our grass areas. So we will do that. Thank you so much. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Bye-bye. Our next item is our monthly report by Captain Kratzer of MCSO. Looks like get that all set for you. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. As always, it's good to be here for the monthly presentation. I'm going to hit on a few items this month, one of them being school safety. So with the start of the school year, we met with the new Fountain Hills superintendent who was the prior Fountain Hills High School principal a couple of years ago. So Dr. J, we've worked with him for years, and he's really great to work with, and he has a very strong interest in school safety, including his background and his doctorate in that field. So we met with him, our leadership team here in Fountain Hills met with the school superintendent. We talked about some of the roles of the SRO and some of the things that maybe we could expand on with the SRO in the school to maybe help promote school safety. And again, just reminding members of the community that the town of Fountain Hills contracts with MCSO for that SRO position. And we think that's great. So we're glad to have that position. And with some of the staffing shortages that we've had in the last couple of years, that's one position that we've always made sure was staffed just because of the importance of it. But when we met with Dr. J, we talked about some of the the concerns he had with school safety, and we brought with us two of our detectives from our counterterrorism unit that they handle school threats and school vulnerability assessments. And Dr. J was interested in what they had to say, or maybe some of the ways that advice that they had. And they talked to him about the ALICE training, and that's a FPI standard, or MCSO, and some of the other government entities push for schools, and it's a strategy for them for any kind of active shooter that may occur. It's training for staff, and it's a protocol for maybe how to approach those situations. And they were interested in having that training. So our detectives from our counterterrorism unit will work with the school superintendent and the school staff to push that training out for them, and that'll include another vulnerability assessment for the school. Another important thing that after some of the recent events, Uvalde, and the response to that, and some of the failures in that response, it was important for the sheriff's office to ensure that our deputies had recent training on response to that. So our SWAT team has worked with some of the other schools and put on some training. And this last weekend, half of our staff attended that active shooter training at a school, and some scenarios for those sort of incidents and how that response would look like, just to ensure if something like that were to happen in the county or in any of the areas we're responsible for, there's no question as to what that response would look like or what would be expected of the deputy. The other half of our staff should attend that training in the next month or two, just depending on availability for our SWAT team. But I think that's important, and it's great that the school superintendent is interested in making sure that they're shored up in that area. So next I'm going to move to talking about some Governor of Highway Safety Aggressive Driver Grant money that we were able to utilize here in Fountain Hills. Our Lake Patrol Division is kind of the distributor of that grant money. They mostly utilize that grant money, but if some of the districts request some of those hours, we can get it. So we were pretty aggressive in trying to get some of that grant funding, and we were able to get 180 hours of grant money over the last 2 months. And we utilize that for, you have to use it for, obviously, traffic enforcement, any of those violations that you can chalk up just about anything to aggressive driving, speed, stop sign violations, turning violations. So we were able to get 180 of those hours. So that cost no money to the town. That was money that was all grant funded. So it was, there's no cost to the town. None of our personnel hours were lost to this. It was added hours that were given to us. So in that 2 months, that resulted in over 300 traffic stops in those hours of grant money that we used, and over 200 citations. And an area, we put some concentration on some area that's been an issue for a long time, Palisades and Shea, the no right turn on red. And we had 60 stops over the last 2 months there for that. And so we've talked about some of the challenges with the enforcement there. But the deputies who worked it, we used consistent deputies who found some strategies that worked. Yeah, it worked out pretty well. So we're trying to stay committed to that to help decrease the violations there and get some of those violators. And education hopefully will curve that over the long haul. And then finally, I wanted to talk about increase in the staffing to the district here. So Fountain Hills District 7 is what we call it for MCSO. Last time at the council meeting, I didn't introduce him, but my executive chief was in the room and listened to the study. He's only been my executive chief probably for the last, I want to say, 3 months. The prior one retired. And since he's been over Patrol East, he's over Patrol East and West, he's the executive patrol chief. He's really taken a focus on making sure that we're meeting our contract and trying to get to the level of meeting that. So I had 5 additional deputies assigned that started yesterday. And so we were at 13 over the study we saw, and we're up to 18 now. So we're getting there, one more to meet that completely. But that gave us the opportunity to go back to our old staffing model where because of short staffing, we had to adjust that staffing model, and now we are back to a 5-squad model. It gives me the opportunity again to have a community action squad who can deal with issues that are unique to the town, whether it's speeding, direct patrols on speeding, concerns by neighbors, other issues if we've got party house issues, short-term rental issues on a Friday night, Saturday night, especially as the weather starts getting nice, they can get special training in that area and go out and address those needs. And just anything that's unique to the town, that's their main function, is to address some of those issues. And we haven't had that for a couple of years. So it'll be good to have that resource. And especially with having the detectives for the district now centralized, all three of the deputies that are assigned to that squad are also detective certified, so they can work some mid-level cases and help us in that area to make sure some of these cases that are important to the town or time critical for us, that it gets the attention that they deserve. So that's my update. I'm sure there may be questions or comments, and I'd be happy to take those.
Thank you, Captain.
Captain, just to thank you, because I've seen a real difference in traffic enforcement, and particularly on Saguaro. And I've been seeing more and more police cruisers sort of stationing themselves so they could watch the traffic and go after people. So it's really worked.
Thank you. Just to add to that, we did really try over the last 6 months to really emphasize and get more production out of our patrol staff in terms of traffic enforcement. It's been important since I've been here, but just trying to get more and more out of them. And we've had a 120% increase in our traffic stops over the last 6 months, and that's not even counting the grant work. So the deputies are stepping up and doing the enforcement and trying to be more proactive. And with the addition of the deputies that we had 5 more, I would imagine we'd continue to see an increase there. So slow down if you're driving through town.
Other questions or comments? Anyone? I'm just going to bring this up when you mentioned the new or the additional folks, and that they may be able to do things that are a little more, localized. That we've been getting. We had a person that was upset about someone that has signs that have things that are, they're not pleasant to read, and we had that a while ago with a car that drives around that has a swear word on it and such. And I don't think that the freedom of speech laws have changed too much, but one of the things that we did ask about was, is there a way to tell or any options to let people know that, if the police aren't the avenue to do something about that because they're not technically breaking the law, would maybe some of these folks get some knowledge that would say, but here's an option, or here's something you can do. I mean, the thing with the signs and the swearing, I always wonder about that, because when they talk about, it when you see it, some of that seems really offensive, and I don't know what if there's a line. And Aaron, I know you're looking at me like, yeah, I mean, the line is the line doesn't exist, Mayor. I guess. And and freedom of speech, it's obvious, and freedom to exist on a public street is your freedom to do so. So, I don't know. I guess I'm wondering if there are any other, social options or other entities to direct people to, where they might find some relief, or at least get answers that satisfy them, to know that the police are doing everything that they can, but they just can't really do some of those things that people would like.
Yeah, I appreciate the question, and I understand the frustration that exists with residents. We've had several calls regarding the gentleman you're speaking about with the signs that are in very bad taste. And we've talked about some of the challenges with First Amendment freedom of speech and, crossing that line. Some of the things, I've reached out to the town prosecutor recently. We're waiting to get together and just talk about maybe some avenues. It gets very touchy, and it is very difficult for law enforcement to take action on something that may be offensive to some people. But there are statutes on the books about public nuisance. I mean, trying to make that fit, or does it fit, is the question, and trying to find. So we talked about the gentleman with these signs, and we've gotten calls on them. Deputies at times will contact these individuals. Sometimes people, it's how they phrase it, I'm worried about, if the person has water, if they're okay. And deputies will oftentimes, when the call is phrased in a way, where if it's just, hey, this guy has signs that are offensive, and I don't think that's okay. Deputies then aren't able to contact him because there's no law that's being violated. And we talked about some of the challenges too with some of these folks who don't want contact from law enforcement. When we tried to contact them, it's either been a belligerent response or they've walked away saying, I didn't do anything wrong and I don't want to contact with you. But there are some things, one of the things deputies try to do when we do have contact with some folks who, appear to be homeless and maybe have some mental health illnesses, or try to offer them some services and see if there's some shelters that they'd be interested in going to. We always try to give them water and start the conversation that way and be approachable. But the minute they don't want that contact anymore, the consensual contact, that ends our involvement with them. We'll look into some options, maybe discuss it a little bit more. I know, we had talked just briefly about that yesterday and seeing if there is something out there. I'm not aware of any social services that someone could call. Messaging might be good in terms of, people's rights. I don't think it alleviates the frustration that some folks have of, because the emails that we saw about having to have those conversations with your children when there is something on those signs, it is very challenging, and it's hard to say, well, it is what it is. You just have to deal with it, and he can do that. So also we're working with some of the businesses that if these folks are on their property, that they have that right to not have them there, and we can come and let the person know, hey, you can't be on this property. Then if they refuse, it's trespassing. A lot of times they're on public right-of-way, which makes it very challenging. I think that's where you got the look from Aaron on that one.
Well, and
So-
and on the public side of it, we've taken some actions when it comes to washes and when it comes to parks.
Right.
As much as we can without infringing on, the enjoyment of these things from our residents, so.
Sure. So it's a
I
work in
appreciate
progress,
that.
and with our SWAT 5 deputies who have a little bit more time to be proactive in the community, we'll see if maybe we can find something, messaging or something.
If there's
or-
any, or if there's some other municipality that found something
Sure.
that works, you never know.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. It didn't go unnoticed that when you said swearing, you looked at me. So I would completely lose my ability to communicate if we didn't swear. So just put a sign on the door closed. So Cap, thanks for the update. Would you please get with Bo and Bob Burns? And I think it would be very important for those numbers to be communicated to the public because, I think that would deter a lot of people if they know that's a really good number. That's a high number. I had personally called you and told you about the people turning red.
Right.
It's crazy. So, and I knew that being able to set up on that position in order to catch somebody doing it, normally when you see a police officer's car, you make a stop, a complete stop. But when you don't see anybody and the vehicle that you guys are using is a phenomenal vehicle, I had no idea it was an unmarked until I got up close enough and then noticed the lights hidden. So I picked up on it right away, but the average citizen will not pick up on
Before
it.
you made the right turn.
And I immediately hit the brakes. But anyways, I think it would be very beneficial if you were to publish these numbers because they're very high, and I think people would get the message, especially on, Facebook or whatever stuff.
Yeah, will do. And we're going to continue to get some of that grant funding so we can continue that added enforcement as well. So that'll hopefully continue for a while. There's so much that's allotted to the SO, but Lake Patrol's been great at giving it to us, especially because we're a contract town and they know the importance of it, so.
And also in the future, when, if you have one of your supervisors from at headquarters in the meeting, if you could let me know that they're sitting in the meeting because I talked about them like a dirty dog. So I would appreciate a heads up in the future. Not that I probably would alter what I was saying anyways, but I'm sure the chief left the room and wondered,
maybe
what
the,
exactly, what's with this guy?
Maybe the raw feedback was good.
But I'm glad
We got
that
5
we're,
more deputies. so.
listen, the whole time, and as I always said, it wasn't anything against the men and women or you, but we need to fulfill the obligation.
Absolutely.
That's 50% of our budget, and if we're paying for a service, we should get what we pay for.
Understood. Thank you.
All right. Good way to wrap it up there, Dave. Thank you. Thank you. Next, we have our call to the public. Do we have any speaker cards?
Yes, Mayor, we do. First up is Linda Salovich.
Hi. please say just not your address, but if you live in Fountain Hills.
Yes, I am a resident of Fountain Hills. I've lived here for about a year. And I would like to thank the mayor and the council for hearing my concerns this evening, first and foremost. The purpose of this discussion is to make the town council aware that the residents are concerned about the perceived inaction with the town regarding the homelessness concerns in the town. We are concerned that this could grow into a major problem if left alone. Recent examples of aggression at the gas station, Circle K, and for lack of better terms, some craziness at Kiwanis Park, convince us that proaction versus reaction is the best solution. Please consider this as a call to action to address the situation so that it does not become a problem as experienced here and elsewhere for this town. We can further discuss public safety, loss of revenue, image, and the pleasure of walks in our beautiful park and elsewhere would be impacted by lack of action on this issue. Thank you for considering this as a fundamental issue of concern for the residents of this town. We hope that this concern is foremost on the minds of all elected members, and we look forward to positive action from the town on this matter. Thank you very much.
The next, well, first of all, I just want to let everyone know that the timer is not working. I've pressed it millions of times, so I'll take a minute. I'll let you all know when it's time, your time's up, okay? All right, next we have Rick Watts.
You better know the timer wasn't working. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. My name is Rick Watts. I've been a resident of Fountain Hills for over 33 years. My curiosity was piqued when I got the report, or read the report on the community center. I've been a contractor for 40 years and facility maintenance as well, and have experienced exactly the same thing. So a couple of things that I noted, and I think that Alan Buick and Bears did a good job in what they presented to you. The water testing and all of the information that they provided, very good. But they were clear on what they've included and implied things that weren't included. So I wanted to make sure that we were going to talk about things that were addition, so we didn't have to go back and refit, redo, refinish surface areas. Some of those things are things like biological growth, going further than just the areas that they opened until we get to dry wall surfaces as measured by a moisture meter. Corrosion, where we might have structural integrity issues. And so we want to make sure that we do some non-destructive testing, so again, we don't have to go back in and open those walls. Fortunately or coincidentally, with EPCOR being here tonight, EPCOR has done a great job of helping identify underground leaks, and in this case, underground slabs that were implied, again, not specific, but there was an implication either through this contractor or someone else, and I don't recall where, that there could be underground leaks as well as exfiltration from the sewer system. And EPCOR can do a good job of helping to identify those. And then we can get a contractor that can pinpoint the exact location. So that it was, hopefully it's a good omen what they showed up tonight. The other area that is really of concern, and I've again experienced this firsthand, is the roof drains. The roof drains being fouled and not draining properly, you have a structural issue. And they're, on average, there's about 5.2 pounds per square foot. And when you extrapolate that over the 25,000 square feet, the amount of weight that is in addition, and our roofs out here are not designed for snow loads or heavy rain loads, but we get them. So it's imperative that we get good drainage off of the system. So in that light, I would ask that we review our internal procedures to make sure that we address, because it's a maintenance issue, that our staff addresses making sure those roof drains are clear. And finally, in an effort to possibly recover some of the cost that when we finally do put this to bid, including some of these issues that I addressed, that we look possibly to performance bonds, errors and emissions insurance on engineers and architects who have been here before that maybe didn't oversee the implication of the sill pans or skill cans. It depends on what part of the country you're from. May have been some oversight, and maybe we have a possibility of recourse from either a performance bond or from a architect's errors and omissions.
Thank you.
And I think that does it.
Oh, sorry.
I'm out, thank you.
Thanks.
Our next speaker is Larry Myers.
Council, Mayor, Vice Mayor. Commissioner Watts, actually Rick Watts, since he was speaking to you as an individual, pretty much as an expert on this. I read this as well, and I do have some expertise on it. It troubled me. It looks expensive. I too would like to see some, at least exploration of performance bonds for the people that over the years, obviously there's no one sitting on the dais and probably no one even on the staff when this thing was built. Well, Mike was here, Mike was around, but I mean in terms of being involved with the construction and everything. So the thing that troubles me is organic material. This was written on June the 14th and we've already waited 3 months to even start talking about it, and organic material grows. Also, the roof condition, when that roof coating starts to blister, the foam starts to deteriorate underneath, and your problem grows exponentially more expensive. So I think last week while we were discussing what to spend our money on, Councilman Spellich said we should start looking at things that we have to spend where we absolutely need to spend. This looks like it's going to be a pretty substantial need. I think that any of the things that are maybe once should be postponed indefinitely, and I think you'll probably come to the same conclusion. So thanks for the time.
That's it for public comment.
Thank you very much. Our next item is our consent agenda item, which is everything except 7D. Can I get a motion, please?
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thanks very much. So when we do this, then the item becomes the first item that we're looking at, which is a budget transfer. And I believe David Pock will be presenting. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Christmas came early for me. I got to talk about budget one more time before the retiring members leave. All right. Yeah, put me on 3 minutes. All right. So I'm not sure if you'd like me just to go through each individual item, if there's questions about specific ones. I do have just a couple of notes in general to say, just to make sure everybody.
Just maybe overall why we do them. They're, fairly routine, but in this case, we have the CARES money coming in.
Right. Okay. So just a note that none of these transfers move money. It moves the budget authority or the permissions to spend the money that's already in those funds. We're not increasing budget authority. We're just moving it. And then I'll also point out that I'm always open for questions from residents, phone calls, emails. All of my contact information's on the website and the finance page, so if somebody has questions, they can definitely reach out. As far as these, we actually have two different sets, or two different transfers that are taking place. We have 2 items for fiscal year 22, which ended in June 30th. As we go through the audit process, as we go through closing out the fiscal year records, there are things that come up, invoices that get, maybe received in July or August that go back to the prior year that puts certain line items over budget. So we need to go back and make transfers, even those out. And that's happened in 2 cases. The first was in the CIP fund for the splash pad. There were some changes required by Maricopa County on the surfacing of the splash pad that actually increased the cost by $19,000. So we need to move $19,000 into that project. That is actually probably a little more safe on my part. Since that specific transfer is going from the CIP contingency into a CIP project, technically under our implementation policy, we can move that administratively. However, since it is a CIP project, we wanted to make sure that everybody saw it, the council saw it, that project did increase by that amount. The second one there is $6,000 from our general fund into the vehicle replacement fund for $6,000. That is for increased cost of outfitting the new fire pickup. So that equipment cost went up $6,000, so that's what that one's for. Are there any questions on those fiscal year 22 items? Okay. So fiscal year 23, as you know, we do our budget. It's pretty much, we have a pretty good idea of what the budget's going to be in April and March, March and April. However, we don't always get everything exactly right. We did have an engineer's estimate for the Panorama Phase 2 project. 2 weeks ago, council approved the contract for that project. And again, this is something just a little bit more transparency on our part. As part of that motion that approved that contract, it did authorize the budget transfers that were needed for that, because that contract actually came in slightly more expensive than what we had budgeted based on the estimate. Just to keep everything all together, we put it in here as well, just so that everybody would see it at the same time. The next two are what you alluded to, Mayor, and that's the ARPA money, the American Rescue Plan Act. Last year, fiscal year 22, we received $4.2 million. This year, fiscal year 23, we were scheduled to receive another 4.2. When we decided back in March and April, I didn't want to absolutely say that we were going to get that money. So the entire public safety budget was put in the general fund. Now that we do have it, we did receive that deposit at the beginning of July, we need to move that budget authority from general fund to our special revenue fund. In addition to that, at the September 7th meeting 2021, that was when council authorized us to apply and receive the ARPA funds. In that motion, it actually delineated then that it would be spent exactly for those items. So it's kind of has been done before, but we just wanted to make it a little more public. All right, the last two items, we had $500,000 from general fund to our facilities reserve fund. If you remember, council authorized $500,000 for facilities reserve, in addition to a $1 million for facilities reserve for the Fountain Park. We matched that $500,000 with our expected budget for that fund for the year. Based on fund balance from leftover from fiscal year 22, we have about $500,000 in addition to that that could be used for ongoing maintenance and repairs. So that's what this $500,000 would do. It's basically projects that didn't happen last year that we can do in 23. And then finally, $25,000 general fund to Parks Administration. Originally, the Sunridge Park project was in the CIP fund. but since there's some question as far as when or if that project's going to be done, I decided it's better to avoid those accounting problems by leaving it in CIP and just expensing those items in fiscal year '23. So that's what that does.
The last one, the $25,000, are we still working on that, or where are we at with that process? And is it a local party that's doing that work for us?
It is a landscape architect firm that is trying to work with us, and then we'll be working with the neighbors on having what they would like to see in that location.
Okay, I just want to make sure that, because this has come up before, that we're not jumping the gun on this. The neighbors are definitely all on board with this?
We have a public outreach. We met last week with some select neighbors that have expressed either interest or concern, and show them what we had initially looked at, and they were somewhat pleased with it. We're going to be trying to get a facilitator in to help us with a civic engagement process with the neighbors that live in Sunridge. So that, I believe, is, when are you thinking that is? So, yeah, so the money is appropriate, and it is needed for paying the firm to do the work that they've done.
And that firm, is it a local Fountain Hills firm? Now, the reason I'm asking that question, and I know this isn't on the agenda, but, you know, we're doing the branding program, and a couple of residents reached out to me and said that a local Fountain Hills business had applied for that, and for some reason, we sent that business down to Tucson. I think, and I've heard Councilman Spellich sit up here and rail about this from time after time, we have to do everything we can to use our local businesses here, and if it's a policy that needs to be changed, where we give a little bit more credit for a local business, I want to see something happen along those lines to make sure that we're doing everything we can to support our local businesses here in this town. I think it's just important, and I think it's just good business. So I don't know where we are on that. But
I think you've probably noticed that we have done a lot to reach out to our local businesses. We've actually had a forum here where we invited them. We have done a lot more, I think, outreach to try to inform them of the opportunities for bidding. A lot of times we don't get the bids even from our local vendors. As far as this particular one, no, they were not Fountain Hills based, I will tell you that, the landscape firm. As far as the branding project, I think I'll just leave that for the Economic Development Director to give you a memo that explains the process that was engaged with that.
Okay.
It's not on the agenda.
It's not on the agenda, you're right. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I was just going to say, and if I can't speak to this, just tell me, but I understand what the councilman's saying, but when we go out to bid, we put out criteria, we look at their background, there's a real careful analysis before you select someone, and oftentimes they even interview the principals. So, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I don't think it's a haphazard process.
And that was not my intent. I didn't say it was haphazard. I just think that we have done a lot of outreach, Grady, there's no question. I believe that, but I think if we have a local business, we should give them some extra credit, I think, too, for, it's our policy. Look a little harder at it, maybe. I don't know.
Why don't we, I don't think we were supposed to be having this particular conversation right now, Aaron, because this isn't on the agenda. I think we can go further taking this later.
Well, I think I agree, number one, with the prospect that the council, it is within our purview to adopt those types of policies. And I also agree, Mayor, that we should probably leave that for either council retreat or an executive session to provide legal advice on what the contours of that are.
Thank you. Do we have a speaker card on this item, Linda?
We had an email from Crystal Kavanaugh. Do you wish to speak? No. Okay.
Okay, so that would be if there were any specific questions about any of this. I have no questions. Anybody else? Can I get a motion, please?
I'll move to approve the attached budget transfers as requested.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you, David. Our item 8A is about the special use permit that we had looked at earlier on Ivory, and John is going to present. Thank you.
Get this to where I can. Oop, and we're already to the next slide. We're going to go right through this in a hurry. So just some quick background again, just to make sure we remember what we're talking about. We have this area up here at Fountain Hills Boulevard in El Pueblo that is Plat 106, and the request is for a special use permit for the lot in the southeast corner to allow residential use as part of that development. Here is a aerial image of the same site. A little closer up, again, we're talking about this lot in the southeast corner. This particular development has the common parking area to go with the various lots in the subdivision. So here, again, is a little closer look at the proposed development with the floor area for the office on the first floor, 2,000 square feet, and then the rest is some tenant storage and extra garage space. 4 units on the upper level. Required parking overall for this development is 17 spaces, and between the interior parking spaces and the others immediately adjacent to it, there are approximately 20 spaces immediately available for the development. One of the questions last time was wanting to see the actual floor plan for the upper level apartments, so that's been provided now, and it is the 4 units. Each of those are 2-bedroom apartments. This is, again, still somewhat conceptual plan, although it's getting a lot more specific as we go along, but they will have a follow-up formal site plan review process that we'll go through before they would get to a building permit. These are the elevations that we saw before. They've only changed slightly to accommodate the fact that there are the 4 units instead of the 5 units in the upper level. Just because that's been one of the issues and thoughts is that architecture something that we ought to encourage some modifications to as it comes through the site plan review process. Just some quick images for surrounding. You have the residential single-family or duplex developments to the west and to the south that do have that typical residential character. Within the commercial area, you have some variety in what's in the center. The 2 across the top are the ones right along El Pueblo, and on the west side have a little bit of a Adobe Spanish kind of look to them. There's another building to the north that looks pretty different from the other 2, and there's also put in the one across the street that was a charter school, just giving some image of what's in the area. So as we continue to work with the applicant on that and possible modifications to the facades, we'll look at what can kind of help with that transition from the residential neighborhood to the west to this commercial center to the east, and fit that character best we can. So again, coming back, one of the other issues has been the parking and how much parking is or isn't available or will be available for this. So again, you can see the overall site and the parking area that's there. They are proposing to have, again, the interior parking spaces as well as in those spaces immediately adjacent to it. We feel will adequately meet all their parking requirements. So the rest of the parking lot remains available for the other commercial uses in the center. In discussions with the POA for this area, they don't have any significant concerns for the proposed use and its impact on the parking. You know, long term, they do see the potential if the lots were to develop out to the maximum capacity, there could be issues with the parking lot. If residents were using the spaces in the parking lot versus the one inside the garage, they could happen to have to park a little further away, or some potential long-term concerns, but currently they have no particular issues with this. I think I just covered all the things on this slide in those comments. One of the other things that came up at the last council meeting was concern for future uses and some things that could happen in these buildings if it's not used as proposed by the applicant. One of those being the community residence uses. For that type of use to happen in the zoning district would require a different special use permit to be applied for and approved. This one that's applied for wouldn't allow those uses, so that would come back through the P&Z and council process with public hearing and public notice before that could occur. Another seems to be any concerns with the drug and detox, another topic that's currently being worked on with the Planning and Zoning Commission. While we don't specifically provide for those uses today in our zoning code, we are moving forward with that text amendment, and what's being looked at the P&Z level is that the uses would go in a C2 and C3 zone, not this CC zone, and rezoning would likely have to be done first before any of those types of uses could happen at this location. So again, they're not likely to occur. So Staff and Planning Commission have recommended approval with the maximum of 4 dwelling units, the dedicated parking in the building for the residents, and P&Z also included dedicated parking next to the building for this use, but the CC&Rs for the facility or for this development don't allow for designation of parking spaces, so they won't be able to do that one quite exactly, but that is certainly the intent. That's my presentation. Questions?
I have a question. Hopefully it's not too stupid, but what do you mean by inside parking? Designated, do you mean covered parking specifically marked for the tenants?
So if I can get the mouse back. So these spaces that are inside the building
Right.
will be first for the tenants.
So that'll just be parking?
Yes.
Okay.
So there's 6 spaces there and 4 units. So you could, the ordinance is 2 spaces per unit. So if you did actually have 8 spaces, 8 people with or 8 cars for those 4 units, a couple of them would have to park outside, but otherwise the residents are parking inside.
Okay, so is there adequate parking? The bottom line, is there adequate parking for this building, considering it's going to be commercial and there'll be designated parking for the owners, tenants, whatever you want to say?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. So John, how will the owner, what is the owner's plans on ensuring that residents use the spots that are for the project? Because what I'm concerned about, and I didn't hear exactly the positive glowing recommendation of that POA about this project that you're saying they're on board with. So I'm hearing a little bit stuff differently. So how is the owner going to ensure that if this is approved by us, that those spots will be utilized by his residents and not taken away from the businesses in the area?
Okay, Mayor, Councilmember, that's probably a better question for the applicant. He is here.
Bring
So
him
how he
up.
plans to do that. Any other questions for me? Yes.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Mayor. You said you're going to work with him on the character of the building for the surrounding area.
Yes.
What exactly does that mean?
Well, as we look at the final site plan and the architecture that's proposed for the building right now, it is a very modern-looking building. It's an attractive-looking building, but I'm not sure it quite fits. I'm not an architect to propose any specific designs, but that would be my pushback on him is what can we do to tweak the design a little bit to introduce a little bit more residential feel to the building to help better transition between the two.
And is he open to working with us on that?
He has been, again, that may be a better question for him to answer. He's been generally open to working on it, but I don't think to any significant degrees. He's not going to come in and totally redesign the exterior, I don't believe. So it'll be, I think, minor adjustments.
Would the color play into that at all?
Color, I think color is probably an easy thing.
Okay.
That's what we said about some other building. Do I need to tell you? Okay.
Before the applicant comes up, if this was just strictly commercial, it would require more parking, correct?
Yes.
And it would not be under cover necessarily.
Correct.
So I'm just as baffled by it as I was the first time. The thing that we're being asked for is to have some residential mixture with this commercial building, which if it was just commercial, it would be, could be 2-story, and it would require more parking, and it would not have any necessarily inside parking. And whatever other tenants, potential tenants, parking needs are, why would they be more important than the needs of this applicants? Why wouldn't they have to worry about whether his parking was, I don't really understand this argument at all, but that you asked the right questions about the commercial, so yes, sir.
Another question too, the building upper left, Didn't we approve a SUP for that for residential?
There was the one, let's see, which way do I need to go to get back to the other way? There it is. It's this building, right, where's my mouse again?
Oh, the middle
The middle
one?
one, yes, it's the one
Okay.
just second one to the north from El Lago.
So I don't think there were any objections brought up at that time. I probably passed unanimous.
I believe so.
I'm guessing.
But it was one unit, if that makes a difference versus four, but yes, it did.
There's a big difference. Councilman Charnow brings up the fact that there was no pushback. That was one family living in that unit, not 4 units, not additional parking, one family in that unit. So, and I did bring that up at the time.
If we look at this as, go back to where we were. Yeah, stop. So that footprint there, the way it's approved now, it could be this is a question, not a statement. So put a question mark at the end. I'm under the impression it could be a 2-story building in this exact footprint, which includes the 6 spaces that we have that are parking in there. So we could have, instead of parking and what appears to be maybe 2 commercial spots or 1 commercial spot and storage for the people upstairs, we could have 2 full floors of commercial that requires parking outside of the building, correct?
Correct, Mayor, council member. This is an approximately 8,000 square foot lot. So 2 floors, 16,000 square feet, 1 space per 250 square feet. Whatever that math turns out to be, could be what would be going on.
Then my next comment is, it's zoned such that I cannot find in my notes, but I think the hours of operation are like 7 a.m. to 11 p.m.
Right.
And it's zoned so that it's heavy use kind of zoning. I don't know, I made a list somewhere, but correct? So we're actually doing ourselves a favor by cutting back on the commercial occupancy is the way I see it.
Mayor, council member, in terms of the amount of parking and some of the activities that could go on, yes. The trade-off is you've got residents there now parking potentially 24/7, not moving as much as a commercial customer might. But
Or I also see it as balancing whether they work downstairs and live upstairs, or maybe they live there and work elsewhere, so they're swapping out spaces for the commercial people park in the day and then the residential people park in the night. We get complaints every day of the week about what a waste the commercial spaces that we have. And I think this is the best use of that kind of space, especially he's putting parking in there. So we're even cutting down on what could be residences. So yeah, if we talk to him about the color, I think it'll kind of blend in better if you go with the tans or the browns or whatever you guys go with. But I'm in favor of it.
Councilman?
I want to make sure I understand. By right, without a special use permit, you could put 2 floors of commercial, is that correct?
that's correct.
And how many parking spaces would be
So
required?
again, at the extreme, 16,000 square feet and 1 space for every 250 square feet, so that's 4 per 1,000. So 16 times 4, what are they, 64 spaces?
It's a lot of spaces.
Yes.
And how many, tell me again, I'm sorry, how many spaces are we talking about now under the special use permit?
So now with what's being proposed in terms of the combination of uses on here, he's required 17, and there are 20 between what's in the building and those immediately adjacent to him.
Yeah, I think I agree with the councilwoman that this sounds to me like the best alternative.
So parking, the other part you talked about was the design, and if this was a totally commercial building, how much input would be required of us for the design, whether it's modern or whatever? I mean, if this was by right, how much would you kind of weigh in on that?
Mayor, it would come through just the staff level in terms of that site plan and elevation review, and we would take a similar approach if indeed the council agrees, and as they discuss the SUP, that gives us a little bit more weight in terms of working with the applicant on that final design.
Thank you. Again, this whole thing is very baffling to me. Does anybody have questions that they'd like to ask the applicant?
Yes.
Okay, please come up, sir, and then we'll see if there's any cards. Thank you.
John Gerzak, the developer and Fountain Hills resident. So basically, the commercial majority of it will be used by myself. The other area, I'm not sure if gonna need it or rent it out or something like that. But the majority on the bottom right, that's all gonna be personally used. And really with the square footage of the lot, compared if you count all of the parking space on the other parking lot too, that's part of this plat. I think by right, I estimate about 26 is designated for this lot just on the outside. So, this is actually even much less because only 11 parking spots are going to be outside. So, as far as like the overall project, it's really a downzoning of what could be built by right, and the actual building itself. The same exact building could be built as a 2-story like this, and there would be pretty much no input on architecture from staff or anything.
Mayor? Yes, sir. Sir, when would you anticipate breaking ground if this is approved?
Probably sometime in the first quarter. I'm probably the fastest builder in town as far as all that, and I get plans done pretty fast. So
the reason I'm asking is that we've had, as you might expect, a lot of requests for special use permits.
Yeah.
And they take a lot of staff time and council time to go over them, deliberate, and so on. And a number of them never come to fruition.
Yeah. I have 5 projects under construction in town right now, and probably another 5 that are starting the next 12 months too.
So you're not going to waste our time?
No, I don't like to waste time. Plus, it's already been about 6 months in this process, so.
Any other questions for this
And
gentleman?
if we're able to get, approval on this, then, I'm definitely gonna be looking at other, lots in that area, and that whole center to, kind of try to redevelop over the years in that, so.
Thank you. Any other questions? Do we have cards on this? Thank you.
Yes, Mayor, we do. We have 2. Betsy Lavoy. Hopefully I said your name right.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council, staff. I am a Fountain Hills resident, as you know, since 1978, and I represent the Fountain Hills Chamber of Commerce. Mayor, I'm also baffled. We need housing in Fountain Hills, and I, from the Chamber of Commerce, am recommending a mixed use taking away commercial. So that tells you how badly we need housing in Fountain Hills. In the past 13 months, Councilmember Magazine, you mentioned the many special use permit projects that have been presented to this council. You've had 3 in 13 months, and similar to the one presented here today, and all 3 were approved. All 3 were similar to this project. So I also don't understand. This project was questioned for architectural design. Although many similar designs in Fountain Hills were approved. For example, the Gunsight Apartments were approved and look lovely. You might not agree, but I think they look lovely, and it's a similar design. The project was also suggested for approval by Planning and Zoning, given the final drawings brought the dwellings to 4, which it has. So it has accepted that challenge and met with it. Parking was also and continues to be raised, which is interesting because it was also addressed multiple times in a much better fashion than if it were commercial. Not only do the town parking regulations and ordinances, not only does it fit within that, but it also fits in with the president of the association for Plat 106 for the mixed and shared uses. I am a part of the board of directors for Plat 208, so I know and am very familiar with parking issues, and there's plenty of parking in this area, as the president of the association has stated. Additionally, I know you are all very well aware that if this owner, builder, developer decided to change uses of this project, or if he sold the property and that new owner decided to change uses, they would have to go through the proper channels through the town of Fountain Hills in order to have that zoning or those new uses accepted. So I know a month ago when this was postponed, it was brought up for a group home, but that is of no consequence for today's decision for a special use permit for mixed use, because that is not what is before you today. That, if that was ever before you, that would be a decision to be made at that time. But we're focusing on a special use permit, very much like the other 3 and 13 months that you approved. And this area of town has not been built on or developed in almost 20 years. Multiple sections of our approved general plan quite literally support the approval of this mixed project. And I can share those with you if you'd like, but I'm sure I don't have time. And as a voice of the business community, I just strongly recommend approval today of this special use permit. Our town needs it, not for the commercial, but for the residential. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor? Betsy?
Oh, I guess we have a question here.
Just to clarify, you said you didn't understand my comment. It might have been 3 in the last 13 months, but I've been on this council for 8 years, and there are any number of them that were approved and were never built. Now, I know there's a 6-month, I think it's a 6-month time limit, is that correct? Before the time runs out. But I just wanted to be sure he was going to build it, that's all.
Absolutely.
I'm in favor of it, I just want him to build it.
Right, absolutely. And it's not quite fair, though, to ask this new developer and compare him to previous projects that he's unrelated to that have asked for extensions when there's huge staff and building material shortages. It's no wonder. I have all the dates and all your 6-month extensions, and I know the data, and I know that you've had people asking for extensions, which is typical and normal in the building world today.
Yes, it is, but we did not have shortages 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. This is
Correct,
fairly
which
recent.
is not his.
I understand that.
Right.
I'm not disagreeing with you. Take a win. Take a win.
No, thank you. Any other questions? No?
Next is Dawn Prescott.
Hi, I'm Don Prescott. I'm a certified financial planner. I'm one of the people who got a special use permit and built a residence. So I live at the building in between the Sylvester's Wine Bistro and the church. And, you know, we're happy to have, you know, residential neighbors, commercial neighbors to see some life. I run a financial planning office on the first floor. So we're happy to breathe some light. So as a resident, I'm happy to hear that if any change in use means that a potential owner has to come back to the drawing board and come back to the council. Obviously, I'm not a CCNR expert, but my understanding of the CCNRs for 106 will never allow or have dedicated parking spots. That's just what I've gathered, so I just want to make sure the council understands that. Nobody gets a dedicated parking spot there. So, yeah, we're happy to be part of this town and happy to have my business here and to be a resident. So, thanks.
Thank you so much. Any other cards?
No more cards.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yes, sir?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Let me make this perfectly clear. I am not against development, regardless of what Ms. Lavoie might say to others that get back to me that I am anti-development. I am not anti-development. And there seems to be some pushback up here, like we delayed this project, you know. It is my job as an elected official to represent the residents of Fountain Hills. If in my job duties that I ask for more information or request more things, it's not because I'm trying to put up roadblocks or anything. I'm trying to make an informed decision and make my vote worth something. So this general like, oh, well, you've had other people come up here and get special use permits and everything, that's all well and good. Each thing is taken separately. So the tone up here of this is a no-brainer, why are we delaying this, this shouldn't, I will never apologize to you, Mayor. I'm so pissed right now. Or anybody else on this council. If I ask questions about a project and I want the plans, and I want to see what I'm voting on before I make a decision. So if I made anybody up here mad, too bad.
Any other comments or questions? Can I get a motion, please?
Move to approve SUP 22-000001 to allow up to 4 dwelling units and requiring the parking spaces in the building to be designated for tenant or owner use as approved through the site plan.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye. 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 Any opposed? Thanks very much. I think, do we have any discussion or direction to the town manager? Going to adjourn this, and we'll take 10 minutes, and then we'll start with the work study. Is that okay? Okay, motion to adjourn? Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. We'll call this special work session to order, and I think we don't need a roll call right now, and we'll just get going. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We're before you tonight with a presentation from a firm that was engaged to help us try to identify the sources of some of the issues that we've been having with water intrusion in the community center. Tonight, you're going to see the results of some of their testing, and then also they're going to share with us their what would be called near-term and longer-term kind of solutions to try to address the issues. I'm going to turn it over to our Public Works Director, who has a few more words, and then he's going to introduce our presenter tonight, who is Eugene
Alana.
Thank you. With that, I'll turn it over to you.
Eugene Buick, excuse me. That's right. It's Alana Buick and Beers is the firm. Thank you, Grady. Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members. Over the last several months, the town manager, myself, and the facilities supervisor has had an opportunity to have numerous discussions and do what we could to make immediate and or temporary changes to the deficiencies at the community center, and just a little bit of history lesson in regards to some of the comments that we heard tonight. I am fortunate enough to have spent almost 16 years in this organization, the first several of those in the engineering department, and sat in on several meetings with the only other two public works directors that have held the position in regards to discussing the town's buildings, and we have 3 of them here that are just under 90,000 square feet and roughly about 20 years old. There was a considerable amount of discussion related to the community center in regards to the moisture barrier that may or may not have been installed as part of the original construction of that building. Throughout the years, carpeting and flooring repairs all addressed that issue in regards to moisture coming up from the slab. In fact, prior to us engaging the mayor and council for the most recent renovations for that facility, the town manager, myself, and the facilities manager each looked at professional opinions on the type of adhesive that would be required to combat and help support the flooring, not only the ceramic, but the carpeting and luxury vinyl tile, again, excuse me, related to what we knew and what we had been told in the reports that we had read. It is very, very difficult to explain to you how frustrated and angered and surprised we were that as construction was underway to make that building refreshed and a better place for the community to enjoy, when it started raining, water was coming in from places that we could not imagine, from not only the doors and the windows, but the walls. And I will simply state this clearly. I will not assign blame for those deficiencies once I knew about it to anybody else. I will also state that immediately when we recognized these issues, we worked with the town manager and other professionals to address what we could at that time with immediate action. After that, we began to search, and when I say we, primarily myself, trying to see if we had a contract that was existing with a firm with expertise that would be able to provide some sort of guidance. I basically exhausted what we had in regards to existing contracts, and again, to reduce the time necessary. The facilities supervisor noted that at his previous employment, there was a firm that specialized in this very thing. I didn't immediately agree to that. We did have conversation. I had conversation with the town manager, did a little bit of research, and discovered, in fact, this firm is qualified for exactly the challenges that we're facing in regards to the construction deficiencies. That firm is going to be giving you, or at least a representative from there,
is going to be giving you an update of their findings tonight. But there are a couple of things prior to my introduction to him, and I'll use his correct last name this time, that immediately after we were made aware, we began to take steps to seal areas. One of the, in fact, unused doors for one of the classrooms, we used a popular television product that you can spray on a screen door or anything else, and it stops it from leaking, and you can turn it into a boat. I will say that their tape and their spray minimized the intrusion of water through that door. However, ponding on the west side of the building still allows it to enter through there. That one is somewhat of a challenge. We also, during construction, the facilities supervisor brought in a door specialty company to work on, adjust, and or replace the thresholds. As part of that project, we did know that water was running in the main front door, and we took action and addressed that as part of that project, but with a separate funding mechanism to put new concrete in there and a new drainage system to move that water away. Again, we have not just sat around and waited for somebody to do something. We have actually been doing something all along. And I'd like to remind, and I know the council is aware of this, but we have one facilities manager and we have one plant mechanic, is what I refer to him as. He's a facilities maintenance guy, and he takes care of all three of these buildings. And oftentimes, all you'll see of this individual are his feet or from his knees down, because he's standing on a ladder in one of the ceilings of one of our buildings addressing some of the concerns. Some of the concerns that we have are the rain gutters at the community center that come down through the walls. They're referred to as a no-hub system. Town staff, along with the support of contractors, has been addressing those no-hubs. We also, that individual, Paul is his name, noted that while he was in several of these ceilings, he discovered what he referred to as turkey pans. Those are aluminum pans that the previous facilities and plant mechanic put in areas of not only town hall, but the community center, because there was a leak that they simply could not identify its origin, either coming from condensing pipes or drainage structures or roof leaks. Each one of those that have been discovered created a stained tile. To eliminate that, they put in this drain pan, and while they continued to work towards finding that leak, they simply dumped the drain pan. As repairs have been made by staff and contractors, some of this piping has been moved. As a result of that, there is a leak a little bit further down the line, and that happens, or what that does is it creates an additional stained tile. We continue to remove and replace the tiles and take other measures, including most recently, at the direction of the town manager, securing 2 very large humidifiers. And I'd like to report that on average, they're pulling in about 3 gallons of water every 4 hours apiece. The town manager had some concerns in regards to the HVAC system. We have done a back check on that to determine whether or not anything was changed or manipulated by our new contractor. We find no evidence of that. So an explanation, if I could offer it, is that as of recent, the humidity has been higher all the way around. So we recognize and understand the challenges that we are facing. The town manager, myself, and Rachel, who's not here tonight, the community services director, and the facilities manager, had we known about all of the other construction deficiencies, we would not have come to the council with just carpet and other flooring and paint and furnishings. We would have put together a much, much larger project. Now what we're going to do is work not only with this professional firm, but we are working to secure another specialty firm to deal with what's described as organic matter. In relation to that, the stuff that was found on the sheetrock as it was opened for this assessment, that sheetrock was disposed of. While we do not have the individual here that helped to repair and do some treatment of that, we do know that some of it in regards to the organic matter was either disposed of or sprayed with bleach and water at that time. In order to get an assessment of that, we need a firm. And there are lots of firms out there that are eager to run out here and provide their services, but very similar to the forensic, architectural assessment, we need a specialty firm that primarily does their assessments on large commercial buildings with a relatively large influx of residents, people that use it primarily 6 or 7 days a week. With that said, if you have any questions for me related to the rambling that I just did, I will certainly do my best to answer them, and then I will introduce the professional engineer.
Thank you, Mayor. I think what should be at the very front of all of this, and I can't even believe I'm saying this because I'm so against studies or spending money on any of this stuff. We need to get someone in there, some firm in there, that can immediately come and test the air quality and everything else. We have full-time employees that are in that building breathing all this stuff. We also have seniors who could be immune compromised and have underlying medical conditions that could be exacerbated by attending anything in the community center. So I hope part of this plan is to immediately have an air quality test done to make sure, because I personally am speaking from experience. I had a leak in my home and black mold was involved. It is very serious, and it grows like crazy. So I think at the very front of this, before we go on to, and believe me, I've got plenty to say about this report and everything, but I believe that before we get rolling, we need a firm to come in there and test the air quality to give the employees of the building assurance that they're not going to get sick or breathing things that could be harmful, and more importantly, the residents, especially seniors who are going in there, because I was in there, it smells horrible, and I'm worried.
Madam Mayor, council member, we absolutely agree. We are in the process of procuring said specialty company. Again, we want them to be vetted and be able to meet the needs that we have, and that will follow through with an architectural firm that is a specialist in this type of construction deficiency as well.
Justin, I'm not an engineer, but can those no-hubs be sealed off and have that water rerouted to the outside of that building? I think that this is a major part of our problem with this building. I don't know what that would cost, but I'm just asking the question, because if that water's running down the inside of our building and we have any kind of leaks in there, so that's the first comment I want to make. And this just started. Don't we get rain every year? Is this just something we're just now noticing? I mean, what happened 5 years ago or 7 years ago? So again, I'm not asking for an answer, but I'm just throwing it out there because this didn't just happen overnight. And so we cut out sheetrock. What about insulation? What about the framing? Was any of that compromised? Did we treat any of that before we put sheetrock back on the wall? I don't know the answer to that. And then I had air test written down on my list of things here as well, too. So I know you're on top of that, but those other ones, I don't know if we have answers for that or if that's part of our proposal or what, but I'm thinking that those no hubs are a problem, and maybe I'm wrong.
Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor, rerouting the roof drains is going to be very expensive because they currently enter the building at numerous locations, and that is because of the architectural of the building. It's a flat top. In order to push that water off to one side or the other, you have to build that up and create that flow. That is certainly a challenge. There are systems, modern systems, that function and with the proper maintenance last for years and years, and not all of these no hubs and these roof drains are failing, just some of them at some locations. And keep in mind that, again, the single individual we have, along with support of some contractors, does a pretty good job of keeping the majority of this stuff operating without any issues. In regards to the latter part of your statement, most likely, and I cannot speak for the previous facility supervisors, when there was rain, and we discovered this after a nighttime, the water flowed freely, very, very thinly, out into areas near the middle of the floor. And if you didn't see the path from it in the construction dust, you would have thought it would have originated in the center of the floor. Some of their conclusions in regards to the vapor barrier were likely a result of that. The rain, when it rains, it enters and travels either underneath or through the flooring to the lowest point on the on-grade slab. The reason we noticed it is because there was no flooring and no trims, and so you could clearly see the path that it had taken after and during, or during and after the event.
Mayor, Council, very good points and comments, and definitely we are, as the Public Works Director indicated, we are looking at companies that will help us identify if this is an issue. They'll be doing testing. But what I'd like to do, we're speculating up here at the dais before we've even had the presentation. So I'm going to have the Gene come up and give his presentation. He has some cutouts showing photographs of what they did and what they've observed, and so he will be able to answer, I think, your questions, Vice Mayor, that you had about insulation and drywall and what they saw.
With that said, Madam Mayor, I would like to introduce the professional engineer from Allen Buick and Beers. His name is Eugene Buick, and he's going to do tonight's presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Councilman Grady. My name is Gene Buick. I'm with Allen Buick and Burrs. We are a national firm that specializes in the diagnosis and repair of buildings that have similar problems such as yours. Tonight, I will review our findings and be happy to answer any questions. So here's your community center. You have CMU block walls, you have metal framing, you have a synthetic stucco finish, and of course the windows, the storefront windows and the punch windows as well. And a portion of the building surrounded by concrete hardscape, and the other softscape. So here's an overall view. And also, you have your roof, which is a foam roof. Building was built approximately 2001, and it's about 25,000 square feet. And as referenced earlier here, there was an interior remodel around October 2021. So we were contacted by the town of Fountain Hills in February of 2022. A contract was issued to us in March of 2022. And immediately thereafter, we prepared a leak testing protocol. You know, when we were called out to study this, typically what we do is we'll do a leak testing protocol, which tests windows, tests concrete. We're trying to diagnose what the issues are and what they could be. And is it one issue? Is it two issues? Is it three issues? On May 24th and May 25th, we surveyed the community center and perform visual observations, water testing, and some limited destructive testing through the assistance of a contractor. And then we issued a report in June of 2022. So here's some overall photos. I think one thing that wasn't mentioned, if you look on the left, there's this sort of metallic tongue that's sticking out. That's a roof drain outlet. And I guess recently, or within the last year or so, there's actually some improvements made on the site where these wells were installed with drains to direct excessive amount of moisture buildup around the building at this location to direct it into the storm drain. We also have photos of storefront windows and concrete. Here's some more overall views. And most of these areas are experiencing leakage as a result of both window issues, door issues, and then issues with the exterior concrete slab and the hardscape. So here's a snapshot of the testing locations. We tested over 20 locations. We water tested 24, and all 24 leaked. So we batted 1,000, so they say. With the windows, which we'll talk into, which I'll describe. So the windows are leaking, but why are they leaking? And what we're going to do is go into what all the field components are. So with the storefront windows, big picture, obviously they're failing to manage the water. The water's entering into the building. You have vertical mullions that aren't resting on sill cans. You have a lack of sill cans. The window product lacked weep provisions. We have window mullions. So basically parts and pieces of this window assembly set dry. There isn't any sealant to help resist water from coming in. All you have are these rubber gaskets that go around the window. You also have gaskets that are either shrunk or short. We also see disbonded sealants. That's also another path for moisture intrusion. We do see some IGU failures. So if you ever seen in your own home where there's a little fogging or something of your glass, that's an IGU failure. It's 2 pieces of glass with a seal, and from time to time those do fail. But the other thing that's common around the windows, you have hardscape or slabs that are reverse sloped. So not only do you have the window issues, it's compounded by the fact you have water resting against the window. So you have sort of this dam or a pool of water that's building up. So typically what we did was we had our spray rack, and the spray rack, what does it do? It sprays water on the window to see, if the windows are leaking. Of course, through our testing, and I'll show you some photos, we did see water come in. We didn't use negative pressure. That's oftentimes a second step, and basically we had a static test, which you spray the window at about 24 PSI, and we watch the inside and see what happens. So if you recall from chemistry class, we all had our litmus paper, and it changes colors, and that's what we use when we're testing to kind of give you a good photographic evidence of moisture. And so what we have here is, and this is probably after a minute or so, water pouring in. And so water's pooling around the windows. They're also pulling through the bottom of the windows. We have frame intersections that are leaking. You could see there's just many areas that are failing and allowing water in. With the doors, we also tested the door assemblies. Again, reverse slope, concrete, hardscape, perimeter seals that are failing. There's no pan flashings. There's glazing pockets. The glass is allowing water to come in where it's kissing the frame. And we do see daylight at the door jamb assemblies. That's another opportunity for wind-driven rain to come in. So here's our trusty level, and you can see that blue arrow is denoting that there's a reverse slope. So if you have any moisture building up, it then flows into the interior. Here's the double door leak. We see voids, and again, you could see this pool of water that's flowing into the interior. And you can see how far it goes, right? It's just a river that goes deep inside the building. And I think part of that, again, is the slope of the slab and the hardscape. As far as the wall cavities, part of our testing and observations was to understand, is water getting into the wall cavity? And so we could see here when some of the drywall was removed, we see that there is moisture coming in. And what I'm pointing out here to the right, there are open seals, a lack of flashings and voids where the door integrates with the window wall assembly. So we have moisture intrusion into these areas. And frankly, you wouldn't know that that was happening without removing the drywall. No one goes in normally to remove drywall to look for leaks, but part of our scope is to perform these biopsies and see if there is any damage and any moisture entry into the cavity. Here are some glazing leaks. More leaks through the thresholds. As far as exterior observations, there are portions of the slab, this is the structural slab, that extend beyond the footprint of the window. This slab, and it's through shrinkage, a little bit of curling, it sort of slopes back into the interior. And so what you have is a pooling effect of water at the base of the window. So you have issues with seals, and now we have a pool of water building up against the window. Here's a photo. We took our little ruler and noted that there's some openings in the sealant. Again, another area for water to get in. Here's some short gaskets. We also see ponding water adjacent to the doors and walls, going deep inside areas that are fairly protected. There's some damage to the gypsum board. You can see that. Again, we see a little bit of corrosion on the rusted track. And we see the water damage from the presence of water. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is this all because you pulled the drywall? and looked at it?
Is this
All the pictures and stuff are based on? you-
correct? I mean,
Okay.
yes, there was destructive testing to remove drywall so we could observe the condition of the interior. And part of this helps us develop an initial program for the building repair. Of course, I mean, we'll get into the scope of repair, but we have to understand what the structure and the elements look like, because you can't exclude these areas. These would have to be part of a repair project. So we need to know what that condition is.
Yeah, just follow up on an earlier question. About 3 years ago, we had something like a 500-year storm. I mean, it was really, really bad. Is it possible this is just showing up now?
You know, the difficult part is a lot of these conditions are concealed. So you may not necessarily see it manifest on the outside of the wall. I mean, certainly I think it's gone for a while, given the damage and the corrosion we see. You won't see corrosion instantaneously over a 1-year period necessarily. So I'm sure it's been some time that it's been experiencing it. Certainly having a 500-year storm doesn't help. It may exacerbate the situation.
But you showed photos with some ponding water. I assume that happened before.
Sure.
The part that you mentioned was, you know, years ago, knowing that there was something, but they thought it was coming from the middle. It's kind of like what you were saying, because I remember the discussion, I don't know, a long time ago, right, with previous folks, and that's what they thought, and they got the sealer and did things that they could do, but it wasn't the root, I guess, is what you're saying.
You know, this isn't the first time. You have a leak, you rely on certain experts, they tell you, oh, the floor is leaking, and maybe it was. But sometimes not all the issues are identified.
Yeah.
And so now you're learning after you've remodeled it, you do have these sloping issues, you have these window issues, and that happens.
Well, Mr. Watts had said, kind of mentioned the word implied, but it sounds like, I mean, it sounds like you're saying exactly, are you implying something with this, or are you saying it straight out?
I'm saying straight out, there's
I mean,
leak issues, there's water issues, and there's damage issues that
You
have
heard
to
what
be
he
remedied.
said, right? So I was trying to figure out is there something that I'm missing that is beyond this report, because it seems pretty straightforward. Thanks.
Well, what do? You have damage, you have leaky windows, you have leaky doors. There are sort of two buckets here. What can we do today? And what is the long-term plan for this building? So in terms of near-term solutions, and we've done this on buildings, 20 years plus, 30 years plus. One method of reducing or minimizing or eliminating the intrusion of water at the windows is to wet seal them. Wet sealing is an alternative to replacing them in the immediate term. You apply a silicone sealant, UV resistant, and you have to seal all the joinery, all the areas where the water can come in, so you can stop that, so you don't have that pooling and flooding on the windows. So that's one option. Also, let's repair the perimeter window sealants where the window meets the stucco walls. We had a ruler we inserted between the stucco and the window, so there's some delamination there that needs to be addressed. Let's inspect the door thresholds and fully embed those in sealant. Usually what we see that happens in the construction world, someone puts, you know, a couple beads of sealant and calls it a day. Well, you really have to coat the underside of that threshold and set it in a full bed of sealant so water doesn't get in between the threshold and the slab. Another option is coating the reverse slope sills. And I'll address it here on item number 8. In addition to coating the reverse slope sills, before you even coat them, and provided that the rebar has enough concrete cover, you could consider grinding those extensions beyond the windows, so now it slopes positively away from the building. And that's certainly an option. You know, you see grinding done on sidewalks when the tree branch, or the roots lift up the sidewalk. So you could potentially grind that away. And then there's also some targeted repairs where you could cut out and slice portions of the hardscape and introduce a trench drain that then allows water to flow into the softscape and to nearby drains. So there are some, I would say, effective, immediate near-term solutions that you could implement to help reduce the amount of water that's entering into the building. Sure.
that hard concrete that's sloped toward the building, was there any evidence that you saw of that actually settling down? Or was that just, is that just the way it was?
I believe there was a survey done that maybe the building itself was it the building or the hardscape was about, the building itself was installed, I think, a little too low by 0.2 of a foot. So there was some construction issues, but I think some of this reverse slope is actually a function of potentially of the concrete curling just a hair bit and pulling back. One solution I had mentioned was this trench drain idea, and I just sort of cartooned in a trench drain. So you see the slope. So if we can grind a little bit of the curb, could we introduce a trench drain to help manage this water and then go into the landscaping to nearby drain? I think it's an option to consider. Not cheap, but it's an effective way of addressing some of the water that's building up against the building.
Yeah, question. Can we go back to the slide just before this?
Sure.
If we were to undertake the near-term solutions, but then we have to go full bore another year or two, 3, are we wasting a lot of money? Is a lot of this just basically sticking the finger in the dike until we do something permanent?
So, I mean, that's always a concern. I mean, the question you have to ask yourself, can we do something effective today to help reduce that moisture? Because we all know you have to hire an architect, you have to hire the hygienist, you have to draw the drawings, you have to go through the permit and plat check, you have to bid it out. How many years pass by? 2 years, 3 years? So I think, yeah, you will spend some money doing these repairs. I mean, you have to evaluate the cost, maybe get a bid for this, understand what that is. But I don't think it's necessarily a waste. I think we just need to look at it more in a targeted fashion. Is there a way to do something today to get you by for the next 3 years?
I guess I'm probably not making myself clear because I don't really understand it all, but get us by, okay, for 2, 3 years. 3 years comes along. Do we lose anything? I mean, are all these things long-lasting, or they have to be done over again? Wet sealing of windows. If you got to replace windows, wet sealing doesn't mean anything.
Well, sure it does. Today it does, because you stopped the leak now.
Right.
But it's a business decision. We deal with clients all the time. Some want to wet seal it, some want to replace it. Replacing is a lot more expensive than wet sealing. But in the study of these longer-term solutions, yeah, you may end up replacing the windows, and therefore you did consume some money to seal them temporarily that you can't use. Yeah.
Well, and to your point, some of this is a business decision because you talk about what season is it and what's the use of the building and how much is the building going to be, sort of uninhabitable versus do you do something like this? So I think, it kind of goes into more than just the cost to what's the use of and would this be done really, really quickly to address some of the things that Councilman and Vice Mayor had talked about health-wise? Is this something we want to do right away? Great.
I was just going to say, and like the trench drain, I see that as being an overall investment because I think it's going to be something that's going to have to be done regardless. We're showing it's near term because it's something that I understand we can do and get started on it now. Longer term is, the next 12 to 24 months after next fiscal year. So trying to get this started here and trying to get it going is going to be an investment, I think, for the long term.
Let's talk about the long-term recommendations. So first part is to retain a design firm experienced in the repair of exterior envelopes, get a local architect that's familiar with the city, understands the needs. We really have to get this program correctly. What's proposed right now is to think about the replacement of the window and door assemblies with new. Install new waterproofing and sheet metal flashings beneath the assemblies. There will also have to be targeted repair of the exterior cladding, the synthetic stucco. So it's not easy to pull out a window. You have to break out the stucco around the perimeter. You have to reflash it. Then you have to patch it. And then we have to think about the patch. How well is that patch going to hold up? So we have to look at coatings and maybe a reskinning of the facade. So it's very complicated and it's costly, but we have to think through all of these things so that you don't come back here in 5 years, don't come back here in 10 years. And of course, repairs to interior finishes. So in any project that's had water intrusion, you have to have allowances and unit prices to replace framing that's rusted. You have to have allowances to replace the drywall. That all has to be in the plan. And then, of course, the replacement of portion of the exterior hardscape and installation of additional drainage. Again, that could happen now, or that may happen 3 years from now. Again, it's part of your business plan, business decision for improving this building. In terms of a schedule, had a discussion with Brady and the team. Certainly the near-term solutions, you could look at implementing. Some can start sooner than others, but you're looking at a period of between October 2022 and procurement of a contractor.
Well, we could do that air quality evaluation before that, right? And that's kind of the only immediate, like, worry, I would say.
Yes.
Can I make a couple of comments?
Yeah, sure.
We've got a guy in our planning and zoning I think we need to really tap into. That's Rick Watts. He's dealt with a lot of this stuff. He knows people that can get us the help, I think. So that would be the first thing that I would suggest. And then I didn't see anything mentioned in here about the roof yet. Maybe you haven't gotten to it, but maybe there's a concern about that roof. And then the thing that struck me as well is 24 tests, 24 leaks. We are paying an awful lot of money to run this building in energy cost that hasn't even been brought up. And I'm willing to bet you that if we do replace windows, if we have to at some point, that we're going to see a substantial savings in energy cost alone, because if we've got those kind of leaks, that meter's just running nonstop.
Yeah, as far as the roof concerned, it's in our report. The primary discussion points here are the windows, the doors. That's sort of the lion's share of the issue. But certainly the roofs, we've provided some recommendations, and my understanding is the team's looking at getting a repair quote to recoat, refinish the roof, and address the leaking penetrations and those associated components.
Thank you. So Grady, what do you want from us?
So,
I mean, besides that.
So we're going to be fine-tuning. This isn't the end of this discussion. So we're going to be doing two things. As was mentioned earlier, we're going to be trying to have the building evaluated for the interior, for the air quality, and if there's any issues perhaps with mold and mildew. And so you'll be made aware of that. But we also are going to put together a plan as to what these near-term recommendations will be, and then the longer-term ones. So we need to probably pull in another firm that just looks at the architectural recommendations here and what those are going to cost, because that was not part of their scope here to do that. So there's more yet to come to you, and we will be doing that. I would probably tell you that we'll likely put together a capital improvement project for next fiscal year, at least as a placeholder, while we're trying to develop what those costs might be. Again, I really want to evaluate what these near-term solutions might be, because they might really just take care of, I mean, the storefront windows, my understanding is that's completely custom that we have there now. They're not off-the-shelf kind of windows that you just can buy. So that's going to be very costly, and then impacts of replacing windows to the interior finishes, as you heard, can be quite expensive. So again, when I asked you about the sealant, I was told you believe that could be a 25 to 30 year if it's done appropriately, right, on the windows.
Depending how the sealant's applied. Silicone sealants have a very long lasting life. They're UV resistant. If they have the proper dimension, the proper thickness, proper adhesion to the windows, it can last a very long time if it's done properly.
So in answer, that's the track we're on right now.
The other thing is, if we were going to replace them, then you end up probably taking a really long time to not only find them, but to get them. So I don't know that we would want to be leaking all that time either.
Yeah, I think the other thing to consider with replacement of windows, you also don't want to have a quilt patch network of windows. So if you replace the storefronts, then the question comes, well, what about the other windows? You know, the punch windows that may or may not be leaking. So we have to consider all those.
Instead of near-term or long-term, does it make sense to mix and match? For example, are there near-term things and maybe some long-term things that could be put in the little package? I don't know if that makes sense. Or does the near-term obviate the need for some of the long-term?
I think it'd still be two different packages because it would take longer. It would take a longer period of time to develop the drawings and specifications for the long-term solutions. There's part of it's going to be energy analysis. To your point, we have more energy efficient windows that may improve, result in a reduction of energy usage within the building. So there's some energy analytics that have to happen. So that takes time. So it would actually be probably two separate packages.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, it's a great report, Mr. Buick, and it's a troubling report. I have to be honest with you, I read it and I didn't sleep that night, Saturday night, because I read it and it did nothing but really make me angry. I just, if we would have known a portion, even I think a small portion of the magnitude of how bad this building is in disrepair, I don't think any of us up here would have voted for the $800,000 to remodel it. I mean, it's like, your house is falling down, the roof is broke, but you go out and you put hardwood floors in and put up brand new wallpaper and curtains. It's just, we totally did it backwards. I think that this is, and believe me when I tell you, Mr. Buick, a light bulb change and maybe using that little tool to get the garbage disposal unstuck is my total knowledge of anything building related. So I'm not even going to sit up here and try to BS you. But I just feel like, how did our staff, how did facilities, how was this not, I mean, I can look at your pictures and see that the windows don't have sealant. Believe me, I'm not talented, but I know that there's sealant missing. There's just things that I'm so disappointed that we didn't pick up on that. I know woulda, coulda, shoulda, but I feel so let down that we spent so much money to beautify this building and the outside is in such bad shape. And I cannot believe that when you come back with this, that this isn't gonna be north of $1 million. I mean, I just had an estimate for windows on my home and it was 40 grand.
This will be over 7 figures.
Oh boy, December can't come quick enough.
I do want to speak to not seeing or not knowing, and we have clients that have gone through construction defect litigation, and they come back to us and say, we don't ever want to go through that again. What do we need to do? Well, what happens is you're restricted in budget on how much you pay an architect. So you have a finite budget. You don't have a budget for maybe a building commissioning or building envelope inspector, quality assurance person that's working on behalf of the owner to check these things. We have projects where we verify the brand new windows. We'll do a mock-up. We test it, make sure that doesn't leak as they're installing it. So I think some things to think about a long-term is, what is your plan for maybe improving or maybe equipping your staff with tools like us to verify some of the work as it's being installed? And I'll tell you, a lot of projects don't have that luxury. And it is an expense that has to be budgeted in advance. And we see that. People have learned, then rethink how they want to approach a project. So it's an unfortunate lessons learned.
So in your professional opinion, do we do these glazing or siliconing these windows, or rip the Band-Aid off and do it the right way?
You're in a tough spot because they're leaking really badly. So short of putting a giant screen with the special spray over them or awnings, I think you're sort of handcuffed into having to wet seal the windows. Yeah, because you can replace them, but you're going to have a lag time of 2 or 3 years. And I think it's important to stop that water now to minimize the adverse effects on the facility.
So Commissioner Watts, you were here in the front row, and you heard what one of our residents said about possibility of a liability issue with the builder if the builder still even exists. Do you believe there was negligence in the building?
So we do a lot of forensic work. Our company studies thousands of condominiums, apartments, commercial buildings, and there's always a reason why the building failed. It could have been design, it could have been the builder, it could have been a decision made not to include certain flashing elements because it was value engineered. So it's tough to say, but clearly there is a workmanship issue here. But there were other reasons for it.
So in 2001 was part of putting up a building like that? Would that not have included the pans that you talk about?
Not necessarily. I'd have to study what the decision was, to get to that point.
You see where I'm going with
Yeah,
this?
totally.
I'm trying to recoup, if there's any money to be recouped.
If your question, and I'll leave it to
Or
council to answer that question.
Yeah, Aaron would like to say something.
I would. Thank you, Mayor and Councilman Spellich. So I kind of anticipated that maybe this would be where the conversation would lead, at least in part. So we have discussed those issues kind of already internally, that yes, there may be issues related to construction defects or design defects. There may also be issues related to maintenance or building age or something that's incident to other factors, right, that contribute to some of the damage that we have. We are at the most preliminary stages of this. We just don't know what those are, at least in my view. And it sounds like the gentleman at the podium agrees that we would have to evaluate much further to make a determination as to what degree we can attribute any degree of damage. So that being said, it is something that's already on our radar and something that we're aware as we go through this process. We're going to have to look into and keep the council apprised of, because there's no shortage of possibilities of what this could be attributable to.
Okay. And I'm not trying, please believe me, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, because I know whatever you say here could come up if this ever does wind up in court. I live in court, so believe me, I know what you don't want to say. Could part of your plan also be kind of a list of priorities of what you think, like, you guys got to do this, like, this is number one, this is number two, this is number three, in order of importance of, if in the event we don't have this over $1 million figure to get rolling?
We do that all the time.
Okay.
I need to understand your budget, and sometimes we have to work to your budget and use the money wisely. So maybe the wet seal option is just as good. We can verify that by testing the windows after we seal it. So maybe we could save money not having to replace those windows. And we could prioritize this, and what I'd like to tell our clients is we want to give you a good, better, best approach. But I have to understand your budget, and no one has an open checkbook.
Yeah, it's what you have in your checking account. Just consider whatever you have in your checking account now, that's our budget.
Just along those lines about looking at buildings that were built 20 years ago or 21 years ago, is having that slab extend from, beyond the footprint of the building, is that normal, or was that like done?
Yeah, actually, you see it on high-rises, actually, where you can see a slab extension beyond the footprint of the window. But if I were to review the construction drawings, let's say at inception, we're always good at Monday morning quarterbacking everything, right? But so if I could quarterback this one, I would have liked to have looked at that and suggested, let's slope this at a 1/2 inch per foot slope away from the building. Let's put some waterproofing, let's put some flashings if that's the desired aesthetic goal. I'm a simple engineer. I might say, I don't want anything beyond the footprint of the window. Let's not have it at all. But I can't argue with the designer, because there's also a look and feel that you're trying to represent the town of Fountain Hills. You just got a big gold award, and so you still have to look at some of those aesthetic needs that are important to you. So.
But if it, like you said, because I know, I wondered if it had settled, if the building part had settled, but you basically said it was almost like the outside had started to curl up. So is there like rebar or anything?
Oh yeah, there's structural reinforcement within the concrete.
That extends, so.
That extends.
But that's still popped
we don't know how they cured the concrete. We don't know what the weather was like. We don't know how well they compacted the soil. There's so many factors there.
And would that, if there's a lot of rebar, would it interfere with that flashing, or that drainage that?
No, well,
Like how
typically
deep
concrete would have an 1.5 inch, 2 inch cover, meaning
On
concrete
top.
on top. So there is some room to grind it. You can get what you do is get an X-ray or scanning contractor to scan the rebar to see what depth it's at, verify it, chip it a little bit, So there's a way to verify that.
And then talking about money, is this a weather event? Is there any insurance involvement in any of this damage?
My guess is probably not. But, you know, if it could, I just don't know, Mayor. My guess is probably not, but, yeah, exactly, right. But my guess is no.
If I could just interrupt real quick to your point, if it was determined that there was some, and again, we're getting into hypothetical situations here, but if it was determined that there was some shoddy workmanship or it wasn't built to the construction documents, we could certainly work with our insurer to represent the town and go after, but they have some limit on their liability and protecting the town on that too, probably, right?
And I was kind of more thinking of the other kind of insurance, you know? Yeah, okay.
Like property.
Right.
Property and casualty insurance, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm speaking a little bit out of school, but typically that's going to be attributable to a single storm event that causes discernible damage. And I think what we're experiencing here is something that's kind of materially different from that.
Okay, for us lay people,
Sure.
I did a search in the report for the words mold, mildew, black mold. None of that shows up. What we do see is bioorganic growth. Is that mold? Is it the precursor to mold? Help us lay people understand exactly what bioorganic growth is.
So we are not an industrial hygienist. So it's difficult for me to say what mold it is or what mildew it is. All I know is there's something observed on the drywall that's bioorganic in nature. To determine what type of mold it is, in terms of what class it is or what type of mildew, that's where the industrial hygienist needs to come in to help identify that and help articulate what you need to do in terms of a remedy.
Any other comments or questions? Yes, Peggy?
Okay, magician here. Money-wise, I mean, you're asking, you say you need to know what our budget is, but do you have any even concept or ideas? Is a $1.5 million project to start or anything? Because we'll need to look at the budget in order to see if we have the funds in order to start taking the steps in order to remedy these issues and fix it.
I mean, I think first we'd have to prioritize the repairs and then assign a dollar figure to each repair. Through the efforts of professional construction estimators, we could weigh in on what those costs are to develop what we think that cost is and then present it to you. We have to include contingencies, allowances, the effects of the finishes and build that number. So it's tough to say what that cost is today. So certainly it's over 7 figures. And is it 1 million, 10 million, 4 million, 3 million, 2 million? I think there's some homework that needs to be done to get to that point.
Okay, so are you going to come back with a list, a priority list of what needs to be taken, you know, suggestions as far as what we need to do in order so we can get there and get a budget established?
If I can just jump in, I think he's only responding to a question that was asked earlier about prioritization, and if you were to do it differently than a near term and long term. And he said, yes, if we were to do that, it would be helpful for me to know what's in your checkbook. And so we could certainly consider having his firm maybe, you know, do another assistance with this, or maybe they might actually be the ones that would be the ones helping us identify estimates for the repair work. But that's where that all came from.
There. Yeah, and we can afford it. We can afford whatever we have to do. We may not want to spend it, but we can afford it. And so my question is, and maybe it's been answered, you're going to do a near-term approximation and a long-term approximation for cost, 2 different ones?
We can offer that service to do that, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Is it conceivable, I saw several pictures of drywall that you removed and saw some issues. Is it conceivable that there's a lot more drywall that has to be administered to, and then we might find other problems deeper in that building? Or did you just hit the main areas?
We hit
I'm
the
just
main-
wondering if
well,
there's any.
First of all, if you look at the building, a lot of the building's CMU and concrete. So then you have this infill of framing and drywall, where you have a majority of this water damage by organic issue on the framing. So it's conceivable that you have more locations of similar construction experiencing the same leaks. And all of that has to be factored in when you're developing your allowances and contingencies for repairs of the interior.
So will that necessitate a much more thorough examination of that building then, do you think, or?
I think I'd like to defer to the hygienist, let him develop a scope for you and determine what he feels the testing plan would be for that.
I'm just wondering too, we're pulling a lot of water out of that building right now still, and it's been pretty dry. Maybe we need a moisture reading in there as well as an air quality type of, I don't know. I'm out of my element, but I just.
I'm sorry, when you say moisture reading, are you talking about moisture or are you
Yeah.
talking about humidity reading?
Yeah, well, moisture, if your dehumidifiers are pulling that kind of water out of there, that's a lot of water. We haven't had rain now for, well, we had a little bit this morning, but.
Right.
I don't know, you know, how much more moisture there is in there.
Steve, our facilities superintendent, you want to come up? I thought you've been giving me some readings, or you shared with me a reading recently.
Yes, in fact, when Gene and I were over there before we came over here, I think we looked at our dehumidifiers, and one was at 28% relative to humidity, and the other one was in the 40s, the one by the kitchen. I don't know what the outside, you know, what the ambient humidity was today, but I know we had a little bit of, you know, rain this morning, so it kind of varies. There is a noticeable difference in the way the building feels, especially in that computer lab and again in the kitchen area. But yeah, they're pulling out quite a bit of moisture out of the air, which I think has been helpful.
Thank you.
Anything else? Any other questions or comments?
We appreciate it, and I think we've got some good direction from the council, and we will provide you updates on as we progress with this.
Just something real quick, Grady. I'm just wondering how much money we have to spend to figure out how much money we're going to spend.
Just for knowledge, how much was your project? How much did we pay you?
Was it 20,000 something?
I mean, that's all.
Well, I think we know we have to do whatever we have to do, so we'll get there. Thank you so much for.
Thank you.
Yes, very impressive. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Madam Mayor, if I may, in regards to the humidity, and I just checked, so right now around this building we're at about 39%. So the humidity has been relatively high. Keep in mind as we discuss humidity, there are some contributing factors. We have a kitchen there that is in use, and most importantly, an ice machine that is in heavy use, and that ice machine has an automatic drain system into what we refer to as a floor sink. We also have restroom facilities there with running water. So while there is certainly humidity in that building, it's not unusually high. But again, we will continue to monitor it and see what we can do to reduce that. And lastly, and there was some discussion in regards to maintenance. We certainly do our best to maintain these facilities with the staff and funding that we have, and we'll continue to move forward with that and maintain them for the use of all. So even when we discover these deficiencies or challenges with any one of the town-owned buildings, we simply do not allow them to just sit there. If it's a major issue, we engage the town manager and the finance director and secure funding. And more often than not, a lot of the stuff that's addressed goes unnoticed because it's the day in and day out. It does all cost money and staff time. Thank you for your time tonight. We certainly appreciate that. We will be returning, working with the town manager, the professional firm and facilities to address and answer to the best of our ability the questions that have been asked here tonight.
Thank you, Director. If that's it, we're adjourned. Thank you.